With Bhishma engaged in battle against Parashurama, Vichitravirya's indulgences spiraled out of control. He succumbed to temptations of alcohol and liaisons with courtesans, neglecting his duties not only as a ruler but also as a husband. Despite warnings from royal advisors and counselors about his declining health and weakening body, their efforts proved futile. Shortly after Bhishma returned victorious from the battlefield against Parashurama, Vichitravirya died from tuberculosis, plunging Hastinapura into mourning. The kingdom lost a young ruler whose negligent behavior had wreaked havoc on his life. The absence of a ruler posed a severe threat to the stability of the kingdom. Internal strife for power ensued, and criminal activities increased, providing neighboring kingdoms with an opportunity to invade. Recognizing the dire consequences of the kingless state, Satyavathi approached Bhishma, explaining that the survival of the kingdom depended on a proper heir, and lamented that her son Vichitravirya, rendered incompetent by his father's selfish desires, had caused such disasters. She urged Bhishma to immediately ascend the throne to prevent further calamity. Torn by intense pain, Bhishma explained that forsaking his vow of celibacy would be more difficult than relinquishing his body. With a heavy heart and reluctance, Satyavathi, to prevent the curse of childlessness and the descent of the family deities into hell, requested Bhishma to sire sons on the widows of Vichitravirya, according to her command. Since the day Bhishma made his vow, no situation had arisen that tested his resolve. After Vichitravirya's death, Bhishma was the sole remaining protector of the Bharat dynasty, with the responsibility of protecting the kingdom also resting on him. Even if Bhishma had chosen to sire heirs as a king, the world would not blame him. However, unable to consent due to his steadfast loyalty to his vow, and seeing Satyavathi agonized by the potential extinction of the Kuru dynasty due to her son's incompetence, Bhishma was in a dilemma. Bhishma then explained to Satyavathi that there was a righteous way to ensure the continuation of the Kuru dynasty without breaking his vow. He suggested calling upon a qualified Brahmin to perform the practice of niyoga. He informed her that this method had been blessed by Manu for the preservation of royal lineages, whereby Vichitravirya's widows could be impregnated to produce heirs. Hearing this, Satyavathi realized it was time to share her past with Bhishma and began to recount her story. One day, King Uparichara Vasu of Chedi kingdom went hunting in the forest, and upon seeing animals mating, he was overcome with lust. The semen fell into the Kalindi river, where Adrika, a celestial nymph cursed to live as a fish, swallowed it. As a result, she conceived, and when the fish was caught in a fisherman's net and cut open, a baby girl and a baby boy were found inside. Surprised by this miracle, the fisherman informed his leader, Dasharaja, who gave the boy to the king and kept the girl for himself. As she was found by the Kalindi river, she was named Kali. However, due to being born from a fish, she had a strong fishy odor and was called Matsyagandhi, used to ferry travelers across the river in her boat. Parashara Muni, a sage with a deep desire for divine vision, was on a pilgrimage when he reached the banks of the Yamuna River. While crossing the river on a boat operated by Matsyagandhi, despite his spiritual accomplishments, he felt a strong attraction to her and expressed his feelings. Was surprised, wondering how a sage could feel such attraction, especially since her body naturally emitted a fishy odor due to being born from a fish. She questioned whether such desires were appropriate for a sage. She wanted to remain a virgin until she could be properly wedded and bear children through her husband. as it was the righteous path. Despite being a fisherman's daughter, she reminded that ethics and decorum are equal for everyone, and if her virginity were compromised by Parashara's wishes, it would not only betray her parents' trust, but also if her father were to unknowingly offer her as a virgin for marriage. He would commit a sin, and she would be betraying her future husband. Thus, she did not want to be part of such sins. Despite appearing like a fisherman's woman and emitting a fishy odor from her body, Matsya Gandhi's knowledge of Dharma deeply impressed Parashara. He was attracted to her, suggesting that there must be a reason for the greater good, and he promised that her virginity would remain intact and that she would not incur any sin from their union. Matsya Gandhi expressed her skepticism about Parashara's intentions, questioning if sacrificing her life for the so-called welfare of the world was justifiable. Parashara, understanding her concerns, began to meditate right there on the boat to seek the deeper reasons, revealing his insights to Matsya Gandhi as he meditated. Since the beginning of creation, time has been divided into Manvantaras and Mahayugas. One Manvantara consists of 71 Mahayugas. One Mahayuga consists of 4 Yugas. Each Yuga consists of lakhs of years, and each Mahayuga has a Veda Vyasa. Parashara Maharshi, born in the 26th Mahayuga of the 7th Manvantara, is Veda Vyasa of 26th Mahayuga. Veda Vyasa is not just a person, but a title for someone who must fulfill a great responsibility. The first Yuga, Satya Yuga, spans 17,28,000 human years, during which Dharma stands on all 4 legs. Humans naturally possess control over their senses and achieve death at will. The second Yuga, Treta Yuga, lasts 12,96,000 years. In this era, Dharma stands on 3 legs. Human beings begin to harbor selfish thoughts, focusing more on themselves and starting to judge the virtues and faults of others. The ability of death at will is lost, and life expectancy decreases to 10,000 years. The third Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, lasts 8,64,000 human years, during which Dharma stands on 2 legs. In this age, humans often forsake Dharma, engaging in various acts of adharma in pursuit of material pleasures. Negative emotions such as desire, anger, attachment, and greed lead to further moral decline, and human lifespan reduces to 1,000 years. The next age is Kali Yuga, which spans 4,32,000 human years. In this era, Dharma stands on 1 leg while adharma strides on 3. During Kali Yuga, humans live for about 100 years, marked by anger, dishonesty, and selfishness, with limited intellect. In such a self-centered age, rather than seeking knowledge about divinity and Dharma, people regard the pursuit of transient sensual pleasures as the ultimate purpose of life. Unable to tolerate the success of others, individuals use their intellect to support their selfish and envious thought, committing actions accordingly. These actions often do not yield results within their current lifespan, leading them to be reborn after death to experience the consequences of their karma. Thus, they continue to take birth repeatedly to face the outcomes of their actions from previous lives, without ever attaining moksha. The souls of these short-sighted humans are perpetually trapped in the cycle of life and death. To liberate these souls from this cycle and guide them towards moksha by uniting them with Paramatma, Lord Vishnu incarnates as Vyasa at the end of every Dwapara Yuga. Vyasa undertakes the profound task of dividing the Vedas, which were complexly created by the Lord Brahma. beyond the understanding of ordinary humans, simplifying them so that they are comprehensible to everyone who reads them. This noble work of making the Vedas accessible to all is the mission of Veda Vyasa. For the birth of such a great soul, a sage of immense penance and virtue is essential, but equally important is the woman who can withstand his radiance. This is a multi-level nested narrative which is part of the Mahabharata story that Veda Vyasa is narrating to Ganesha. Within this narrative, Satyavati, Vyasa's mother, is explaining her past to Bhishma, revealing the secret of Vyasa's birth. In her story, sage Parashara is explaining the knowledge of time to Satyavati. Born from the womb of Adrika, a celestial being cursed by Brahma to live as a fish and liberated from her curse due to the virility of King Uparachara Vasu, Parashara enlightened her that Matsya Gandhi is the one who will be giving birth of Veda Vyasa of this Mahayuga. Matsya Gandhi, who had lived as an ordinary fisherman's daughter, was filled with wonder, listening to the cycles of time, the workings of ages, and the secrets of reincarnation. Lost in the profound knowledge being shared, she forgot to row the boat, and tears of joy streamed from her eyes as she became completely absorbed in the revelation. Matsya Gandhi, feeling immensely fortunate at the prospect of becoming the mother of a child who would impart wisdom to guide the world through the ages, joyfully accepted Parashara's request. Sage Parashara, with his ascetic power, created a mystical fog around the boat and transported her to an island. There, they united physically. Impressed by her knowledge and devotion to Dharma, Sage Parashara blessed Matsya Gandhi, removing her fishy odor and granting her a divine fragrance that would always surround her. He proclaimed that from now on, she would be known not as Matsya Gandhi, but as Satyavati. Bestowing this boon, and he departed. Astonishingly, the process of pregnancy and childbirth, which usually takes 9 months, was completed in moments, and Satyavati gave birth to a boy instantly. She named him Krishna Dvaipayana, due to his dark complexion and his birth on an island. This boy, without the need for any formal learning, was imbued with the essence of all the Vedas from birth. Possessing complete and comprehensive knowledge, Krishna Dvaipayana grew into adulthood in an instant. With deep respect, he bowed to Satyavati and assured her that whenever she thought of him in the future, he would appear before her, and now he was leaving to perform penance, and he departed from the island. Revealing this to Bhishma, Satyavati informed him that if she wished, Vyasa could bestow children upon Ambika and Ambalika. Bhishma, pleased with this revelation, gave his consent. As soon as Satyavati thought of him, Veda Vyasa appeared before her. Vyasa came to his mother Satyavati, bowed down, and asked the reason for calling him. Satyavati explained the difficult situation in which her kingdom was at present, and requested Vyasa to grant Ambika and Ambalika sons, who could become the future kings of the kingdom. Understanding the situation, Vyasa informed Satyavati that he could use his ascetic powers to grant offspring to Ambika and Ambalika, but they would need to undertake a vow for 1 year. However, the kingdom was already in turmoil due to the absence of a ruler, and waiting another year, followed by the time needed for pregnancy and childbirth, seemed unfeasible, as anything could happen during that period. Satyavati, expressing the urgency, requested an immediate solution from Vyasa. Vyasa then suggested the practice of niyoga, explaining that if Ambika and Ambalika could endure his austere form, fresh from penance, they would bear sons who would become great warriors and heirs. In a situation where all paths seemed blocked, Satyavati saw this as a very good opportunity. She went to Ambika and Ambalika, lamenting the situation. She expressed her regret, saying that if she had not brought them to the kingdom and married them to her incompetent son, they would not have ended up in such circumstances. She sorrowfully explained the process of progeny through the practice of niyoga. Understanding Satyavati's plight, Ambika and Ambalika tried to console her. They assured her that it was not her fault and that there was no selfishness in the harsh decision she had made for the good of the kingdom. They believed it was their fate and explained that it would give them peace of mind to help continue the Kuru lineage through niyoga, rather than let the dynasty end with them. Pleased with their broad-mindedness, Satyavati prepared Ambika first for the niyoga process and sent her to Vyasa. Ambika entered the dark room, and upon suddenly seeing Vyasa in his fearsome appearance with dreads and a body covered with hair, she was terrified and screamed loudly. After a while, when the process was completed, Vyasa came out to the eagerly waiting Satyavathi and informed her that Ambika would soon bear a child. He said that an extremely strong and intelligent son would be born, but because Ambika had closed her eyes in fear during the process, the child would be born blind. Satyavathi, who was listening with hope for good news, was filled with disappointment. Satyavathi immediately went to Ambalika, personally preparing her and explaining in detail the importance of not closing her eyes under any circumstances. Ambalika, though mentally prepared, felt intense fear upon seeing Vyasa. She remembered Satyavathi's words not to close her eyes and managed to suppress her fear, but the fear caused her to turn pale. After the process was completed, Vyasa came out and explained to Satyavathi that because Ambika and Ambalika were born as princesses and raised in a delicate environment, they were terrified and anxious upon seeing his fearsome appearance. He informed Satyavathi that Ambalika would bear a mighty warrior as a son, but due to her turning pale with fear during the process, the child would be born with anemia disease. Although Satyavathi was relieved to know that both would bear sons, she was deeply troubled by the fact that they would be born with defects. As Vyasa was about to leave, having completed his task, Satyavathi stopped him and requested that he perform the niyoga process one more time to ensure the birth of a flawless son. Unable to refuse his mother's request, Vyasa agreed. Hesitant to directly ask Ambalika to go to Vyasa again, Satyavathi went to Parasrama, Ambika's maid, and explained the situation. She asked Parasrama to prepare Ambalika for the process once more, and to encourage her to go to Vyasa without fear, ensuring that this time she would not be afraid. Obeying the Queen Mother's command, Parasrama, with trembling hands, approached the fearful Ambalika to convey the matter and encourage her. She reassured Ambalika, saying there was no need to be afraid of Vyasa's appearance, mentioning that she had seen many sages and mystics since childhood. Though they appeared frightening, they were ordinary humans like us, just less concerned with bodily cleanliness. Unable to refuse Satyavathi's request, but too scared to go to Vyasa herself, Ambalika thought of asking Ambika if she would go instead, and upon entering Ambika's room, she found her unconscious from fear, attended by the maidservants. Unsure of what to do, Ambalika conceived the idea of sending Parasrama, who was not at all frightened by Vyasa's appearance, in her place, dressed as herself. Despite Parasrama's protests that this would lead to her banishment if Satyavathi found out, Ambalika insisted. She dressed Parasrama in her own attire, reasoning that the darkness of the room would prevent Vyasa from noticing the switch, and sent her to Vyasa. After the process was complete, Vyasa returned to Satyavathi and informed her that this time there were no adverse effects. He said that a virtuous son who could easily study the Vedas and uphold Dharma would be born. Seeing Satyavathi overflowing with joy, he added that this time it was not Ambalika who came but her companion Parashrama. Hearing yet another disappointing news for the third time, Satyavathi's thoughts turned dark. She was tormented by the idea that the future kings who would rule the kingdom would be born with flaws, weakening the dynasty through successive generations. The thought that she was the root cause of this potential downfall deeply troubled her. She felt as if the future of the kingdom was slipping away from her hands, with every decision leading towards disaster. Unable to bear this overwhelming guilt, she shared her burden with Vyasa, asking despairingly if she would go down in history as the cause of the Kuru dynasty's downfall. She questioned the reasoning behind continuing the process of niyoga with Parashrama despite knowing her identity. Understanding the turmoil in Satyavathi's heart, Vyasa reassured her, explaining that although the future seemed bleak compared to the past, it was not Satyavathi's fault. He then began to elucidate the reason why, with his divine brilliance, the god of death, Yama, needed to be born in human form. In his ashram, deeply immersed in meditation, sage Mandavya, distancing himself from his physical body, meditating for days on end, completely detached from the material world. A group of thieves, having stolen valuable items, were being pursued by soldiers. In their attempt to evade capture, they reached the ashram of sage Mandavya. Seeing the sage deeply engrossed in meditation, the thieves found it easy to enter the ashram and hide, hoping to escape the soldiers. The soldiers, searching for the thieves, entered the ashram and explained their reason for coming to sage Mandavya, asking if he had seen anyone passing by. Since the sage was deeply immersed in meditation, he was unaware of what was happening around him and did not respond to the soldiers' questions, remaining absorbed in his meditation. Unable to tolerate his silence, the soldiers searched the entire ashram, found the thieves and the hidden stolen valuables, and arrested them. Suspecting sage Mandavya, who appeared indifferent to the chaos around him, the soldiers took him along with the thieves to the king. Despite the king's repeated questions, sage Mandavya did not break his silence. Angered by this, the king concluded that the sage was an accomplice in the theft and sentenced him to a severe punishment, a brutal death by impalement. In this punishment, the condemned are made to sit on a sharp spear, which pierces through their body up to the head, causing excruciating pain and death. Sage Mandavya was subjected to this punishment and was placed on the spear. For ordinary humans, the spear would have pierced through their body and caused death. But sage Mandavya, undeterred, continued his meditation while impaled on the spear. Some sages in the form of birds, passing by, came to sage Mandavya and asked him the reason for this gruesome punishment. Realizing their presence, the sage broke his meditation and, understanding the situation, questioned whether the fault lay with the thieves who committed the crime, or the soldiers who arrested him along with the thieves, or the king who sentenced him, or himself for being absorbed in meditation. The soldiers, witnessing this extraordinary event, immediately reported it to the king. The king, realizing his mistake after seeing this miraculous sight, pleaded for sage Mandavya's forgiveness and ordered his immediate release from the punishment. As Mandavya was being brought down from the spear, a small piece of the spear remained in his body, hence he became known as Ani Mandavya. Not wanting to blame anyone for what had happened to him, he decided to use his ascetic powers to discover the reason behind his suffering. He traveled to the realm of Yama, the god of death, and questioned him. Yama explained that when Mandavya was a child, he used to enjoy piercing insects with thorns, and as a result of that karma, he had to endure the punishment of the spear. Mandavya clarified that children under the age of 5 are not held accountable for their actions, as they lack the discernment between right and wrong. Therefore, punishing Mandavya for his childhood deeds was a grave error on Yama's part. As a consequence of this error, Yama was cursed to be born as a human in the womb of a maidservant, and to live in circumstances where he would witness injustice, but be powerless to act against it. Vyasa explained to Satyavati that due to this curse, Yama himself would be born as a human in the womb of the maidservant Parasrama. As Vyasa had predicted the future, the son born to Ambika was blind. The son born to Ambalika had a pale complexion, and the son born to the maidservant Parasrama was without any defects. The son of Ambika was named Dhritarashtra, the son of Ambalika was named Pandu, and the son of Parashrama was named Vichitra. Ambika, who had hoped for a healthy son who would grow into a wise and strong ruler, felt sorrowful thinking of her son Dhritarashtra, who was born blind. Despite her grief, over time, she accepted her son's fate and overcame her sorrow. Satyavathi, the queen regent of the Kuru dynasty, maintained a composed exterior due to her sense of duty. However, internally, she was constantly tormented by the thought that she was responsible for the birth of heirs with defects. This inner turmoil was a constant battle for her. Despite Vichitra being the son of a maid, Bhishma, Satyavathi, and everyone in the kingdom respected him equally as they did the princes. In the capital of the Kuru kingdom, Hastinapura, under the guidance of Kripacharya, the son of Sharadvat, Dhritarashtra, Pandu, and Vichitra diligently completed their education. Bhishma provided them with skills and knowledge to prepare them for their future duties, teaching them archery, wrestling, various weaponry, and dual combat, along with war strategies and political responsibilities. The ministers and trainers decided that Pandu and Vichitra should receive both political training and combat skills, while Dhritarashtra, due to his blindness, should focus only on political tactics, as it was deemed impossible for him to excel in martial arts. Pandu, with his natural agility, became renowned as an exceptional archer, capable of hitting even the fastest moving targets. Bhishma was filled with pride upon witnessing Pandu's remarkable talent and dedication to archery. Hearing the attendants speak highly of Pandu's extraordinary prowess, Dhritarashtra felt a mixture of joy for his brother's success and sorrow for his own limitation. Dhritarashtra, who had always believed that Pandu and Vichitra were no match for him in any aspect, now felt a sense of competition and inner turmoil upon seeing Pandu's growing prowess, with his blindness being a significant hindrance to mastering archery. The young princes who had previously been united now began to feel a shift. As Pandu started to rise as a hero in the kingdom, Dhritarashtra began to sense that the ministers and trainers were giving Pandu more respect than him. This growing sense of competition slowly turned into jealousy. Dhritarashtra realized that no matter how virtuous one is, the world never acknowledges someone without prowess as a true hero. This realization sparked a desire in him to prove his greatness. Furthermore, Dhritarashtra began to harbor feelings of disdain towards Vichitra, who was excelling in skills he himself could not demonstrate. Unable to accept his own blindness, Dhritarashtra's thoughts began to seek ways to mask his deficiency. Consequently, he found some solace in the idea that no matter Vijayara's achievements, he would always be seen as the son of a maidservant. However, the situation with Pandu was different. Despite being younger than Dhritarashtra, Pandu was highly regarded by the royal authorities, especially Bhishma. Determined not to let his blindness stand in the way of proving himself greater than Pandu, Dhritarashtra resolved to overcome this obstacle. While Dhritarashtra was lost in these thoughts, Bhishma noticed his distress and questioned him about it. Dhritarashtra, lamenting his inability to learn martial skills and engage in combat due to his blindness, revealed his anguish to Bhishma. Understanding his emotional turmoil, Bhishma decided to help. To enhance Dhritarashtra's abilities, Bhishma devised an extraordinary training method. During archery practice, he blindfolded the three young princes, teaching them to rely on their other senses rather than their sight, focusing on the unique skill of identifying targets based on sound. In the initial attempts, all three failed and were unable to identify the targets, leading to disappointment. However, Dhritarashtra did not let this discourage him. He refused to give up and tirelessly continued his efforts. Not wanting to miss the opportunity to prove that he was capable despite his blindness, Dhritarashtra found strength in this new equality created by blindfolding all three princes. He engaged in rigorous practice, staying behind to train even after Pandu and Vijayara returned to the palace. His determination to surpass Pandu fueled his relentless practice day and night. Vyasa imparted a special technique to Dhritarashtra, teaching him to recognize his surroundings through a unique method. By making sounds with his mouth and concentrating his senses on the faintest variations in the echoes, Dhritarashtra learned to perceive his environment. He honed this skill diligently, allowing him to navigate the palace and its surroundings without any assistance. Through diligent practice with extraordinary concentration, Dhritarashtra eventually achieved his goal. He mastered the ability to accurately hit targets using only sound as a reference. With the skills taught by Vyasa, he was able to move freely and without hesitation within the palace and its surroundings. In addition to these skills, Dhritarashtra focused on his physical strength and emerged as a mighty wrestler. Among Kripacharya's students, he could easily defeat the most powerful wrestlers. No warrior, however strong, could break free from Dhritarashtra's grip. He earned the reputation of being as strong as 1,000 elephants. These exceptional skills further boosted his self-confidence. The once daunting and challenging combats had now become arenas where he was unbeatable. In a few days, the most skilled trainees, including the sons of soldiers and ministers who have undergone months of training under Kripacharya, will showcase their abilities in a grand assembly before thousands of people alongside the princes. Today's event serves as a preliminary test before the grand display of their martial skills in the Great Hall. Kripacharya brought Bhishma to the training camp to demonstrate the skills of his students. Even the princes, Dhritarashtra and Pandu, were among these students. Dhritarashtra easily defeated the strongest wrestlers, a feat that Bhishma and Kripacharya had anticipated due to their knowledge of his strength. They were particularly impressed by Dhritarashtra's ability to identify targets and shoot arrows based on sound alone. Bhishma and Kripacharya praised him for his extraordinary skills. Although many had attempted the technique of hitting targets while blindfolded, none had succeeded to the extent that Dhritarashtra had. Despite being blind, he displayed such remarkable talent that the other trainees were astonished. Feeling that his years of hard work had finally paid off, Dhritarashtra was filled with happiness and satisfaction. However, this joy did not last long. In the training camp, a young man with his eyes blindfolded rode swiftly on a horse, following the sound and shooting arrows. These arrows hit the targets with precision. As the students watched in amazement, the young man removed his blindfold and sat heroically on his horse. Dhritarashtra had identified and hit targets while standing still, following the sound. But Pandu, with his eyes blindfolded, rode swiftly on a horse and hit the targets. This remarkable display shifted the focus to Pandu. Those who were already astonished by Dhritarashtra's skills were now spellbound by Pandu's performance. Bhishma and Kripacharya, impressed by Pandu's extraordinary talent, showered him with praises. Even though Pandu was his brother, Dhritarashtra felt intense jealousy towards him at that moment. He felt that the skill he had achieved through tireless practice was effortlessly mastered by Pandu. The thought that his own abilities, which had just been praised, would now be overshadowed by Pandu's display, turned Dhritarashtra's jealousy into resentment. Although Bhishma had praised Dhritarashtra, he also praised Pandu, which instantly wiped away Dhritarashtra's happiness. Noticing Dhritarashtra's feelings, Pandu respectfully approached him and declared that Dhritarashtra, who had defeated the strongest wrestler and mastered archery despite his blindness, his brother, who was about to become a role model for many blind people, was the real winner. Bhishma was extremely pleased with Pandu's noble character. But Dhritarashtra felt that Pandu was deliberately highlighting his flaws and that his victory felt like a charity from Pandu. Unable to say anything in front of the teachers, Dhritarashtra remained silent. Despite months of hard work and finally achieving his goal, Dhritarashtra could not enjoy his victory because he kept comparing himself to Pandu, which robbed him of any joy. The great sage Bharadwaja, during his customary ablution, visited the sacred Ganga river. After his ritual bath, he beheld the celestial nymph Bruthachi immersed in her own ablutions. Despite his ever pure mind, dedicated to divine contemplation, Bharadwaja's thoughts were unexpectedly agitated, leading to an unintentional emission. Astonished by this sudden occurrence, the sage wondered at the anomaly, feeling bewildered about the immediate course of action. Recognizing that such a deviation in his steadfast mind must have been prompted by a significant divine purpose, Bharadwaja meticulously collected the semen and placed it in a clay pot. Utilizing his profound spiritual knowledge, he infused the vessel with rare, potent elixirs, thereby creating an artificial womb within the pot. A few days later, a child emerged from the artificial womb. Owing to his birth from the pot, the child was named Drona. bestowing profound knowledge of the Vedas and other sacred texts upon him. Bharadwaja commenced Drona's education, imparting deep and esoteric wisdom from the ancient scriptures. King Ugrayudha, wielding his vast army, began his conquest, subjugating neighboring kingdoms. He vanquished 18 realms, all renowned for their peaceful and noble dispositions. The formidable Ugrayudha encroachment upon a neighboring realm reached the ears of Panchala's king Dandasena. Realizing the imminent threat, Dandasena devised a cunning stratagem. He spread rumors among merchants and common folk, suggesting that Ugrayudha only targeted realms incapable of retaliation and lacked the audacity to challenge powerful kingdoms like Hastinapura or Magadha. Dandasena surmised that to dispel the notion of cowardice, Ugrayudha would redirect his conquest towards the formidable realms of Hastinapura or Magadha. But Ugrayudha, discerning Dandasena's ruse, launched a preemptive strike on Panchala, slaying Dandasena in front of his wife and children. Witnessing his father's death, Dandasena's son, Vrashada, fled into the forest in terror. Recognizing Vrashada as the heir to the throne, Ugrayudha dispatched soldiers to capture and publicly execute him to solidify his claim over Panchala. Vrashada, determined to remain incognito, sought refuge in an ashram, adopting the guise of a sage and immersing himself in austere penance. Vrashada, who had fled to the forest, grew up as a sage among other sages in various ashrams. To evade the persistent search by Ugrayudha's soldiers, he continually moved from one ashram to another. During this journey, he often visited his friend Bharadwaja's ashram. Despite knowing that assisting Vrashada could lead to his own death at the hands of Ugrayudha's soldiers, Bharadwaja, moved by their childhood friendship, provided refuge to Vrashada. Vrashada was filled with astonishment and wonder upon witnessing Bharadwaja create an artificial womb and bring Drona to life. One day, Vrashada saw the celestial beauty Menaka plucking spring blossoms, and in a moment of unintentional arousal, his semen was spilled. Embarrassed, he tried to hide it by stepping on it. Remembering how Bharadwaja had created life from an artificial womb, Vrashada carefully collected his semen and brought it to Bharadwaja's ashram. Bharadwaja, employing his earlier method, created an artificial womb in a pot. A few days later, a male child emerged from the pot. Vrashada had named his son as Drupada, fearing that Ugrayudha's soldiers might eventually find and kill both him and his son. Vrashada earnestly requested Bharadwaja to keep Drupada with him and provide him with education alongside Drona. Understanding Vrashada's helpless situation, Bharadwaja agreed to shelter and educate Drupada. Under Bharadwaja's guidance, Drona and Drupada grew up together and became very close friends. One day, a royal guard came to Bharadwaja seeking medicine for his ailment. During their conversation, the guard mentioned that King Ugrayudha was planning to attack either Hastinapura or Magadha to dispel the rumor that he could only conquer weak kingdoms. Hearing this, Drupada, filled with immense gratitude towards Drona and Bharadwaja, expressed his appreciation to Drona. He explained that when his father Vrashada was in difficult times, Bharadwaja had helped him despite the risk to his own life, and even agreed to raise and educate him. Drupada, although not a king yet, promised Drona that one day he would repay this debt. He said that if Ugrayudha loses the war, kingdom would rightfully return to his father Vrashata, making him the future king. He assured Drona that whatever royal luxuries and privileges he would enjoy, he will share them equally with Drona. Draupada's magnanimous and noble nature filled Drona with joy. This promise, made out of deep gratitude, strengthened their bond, marking a significant moment in their enduring friendship. The rumor initiated by Dandasena spread extensively, becoming a topic of widespread discussion in the kingdom. To disprove this rumor, Ugrayudha resolved to attack a powerful kingdom next. Among the neighboring kingdoms, Hastinapara and Magadha stood as formidable entities. Magadha was ruled by Brihadratha, while Hastinapara's king Shantanu had recently passed away. Perceiving an opportunity, Ugrayudha decided to attack the kingdom without a king, believing he could easily achieve victory and gain renown for defeating a powerful realm. Stationing his army at the borders of Hastinapara, he sent a message demanding the kingdom's surrender. Bhishma, in a period of mourning for his father, was advised by his gurus not to wield his weapons during this time. Consequently, Bhishma dispatched envoys with peace proposals. Interpreting the peace message from a mighty kingdom like Hastinapara as a sign of weak governance due to the lack of a king, Ugrayudha dismissed the peace proposal. Bhishma, altering the terms, sent another peace message, which Ugrayudha rejected once more. Even to a colossal army like that of Ugrayudha, a direct assault to breach the fortified gates of Hastinapara was not a facile endeavor. Bhishma, biding time until the conclusion of his mourning period, continued dispatching peace envoys. Growing exasperated, Ugrayudha ultimately removed the tongue of the Hastinapara envoy and sent him back alive to Hastinapara as a grim warning. By violating the regal decree that no harm should befall a messenger, Ugrayudha committed an act of adharma. This incident incited an intense ire within Bhishma, yet he awaited the conclusion of his mourning period. With no response emanating from Hastinapara, Ugrayudha commenced preparations for a siege. Meanwhile, the priests declared the end of Bhishma's mourning period. Bhishma, seizing his bow, ventured to the battlefield and unleashed his divine weapons, decimating thousands of Ugrayudha's soldiers in a relentless onslaught. Ugrayudha was astounded by Bhishma's supernatural prowess. Witnessing his vast army incinerated to ashes within moments. Transfixed by the formidable display, he momentarily forgot he was observing a dreadful rebirth. Realizing Bhishma's approach in the next instant, Ugrayudha was slain by Bhishma. Bhishma summoned his ministers, instructing them to compile a list of the kingdoms brought under Ugrayudha's dominion, identify their rightful heirs, and reinstate these heirs to their respective thrones. He also directed them to provide the necessary aid and support for the restoration of these realms. After a few days of diligent search, the soldiers of Hastinapara discovered that Vrashata, the heir to the Panchala kingdom, had transformed into a sage residing in the forests. They reached the ashram where Vrashata was staying and conveyed the information to him. Overwhelmed with immense joy, Vrashata immediately set out for Bharadwaja's ashram to retrieve his son, Drupada, and return to his kingdom. Drupada, expressing profound gratitude and reverence for the protection and guidance provided by Bharadwaja during his times of adversity, respectfully thanked the sage. He reminded Drona of the promise he had made and departed the ashram with his father to embrace his destiny. King Shura Sena of the Yadava dynasty bestowed one of his 5 daughters, Pritha, upon his nephew Kunthibhoja, who was despondent due to his lack of progeny. Kunthibhoja regarded Pritha as a divine present and nurtured her with immense affection. Raised as Kunthibhoja's daughter, Pritha became renowned by the name Kunti. One day, the fierce sage Durvasa visited the hermitage in the kingdom of Kunthibhoja. When Kunthibhoja attempted to send servants to the hermitage to serve the sage, the attendants in the royal palace were terrified. They knew Durvasa to be a wrathful rishi, who would mercilessly curse people for the slightest mistakes. Unable to disregard the king's order, the servants might reluctantly serve Durvasa, potentially causing inadvertent mistakes that could provoke his anger. Hence, King Kunthibhoja entrusted the duty of serving Durvasa to the ever-patient Kunti. Kunti attended to Durvasa with profound reverence and without any vacillation. Durvasa sojourned in the kingdom for several fortnights, and Kunti meticulously maintained his quarters, attending to his needs with scrupulous care. From the inception to the culmination of his stay, her demeanor and deference remained unwavering. She served the irascible sage with such devotion as if attending to him was her providence from a prior existence. Kunti, with her grace and humility, managed to appease the notoriously short-tempered sage Durvasa. Deeply impressed by her service and devotion, Durvasa, upon his departure from the kingdom, bestowed upon her a boon in the form of a mantra. With this boon, Kunti could summon the gods to earth and bear children with them. Being of tender age and unaware of the profound implications of such a boon, Kunti hesitated to reject it, fearing the sage's wrath, and thus she accepted it reluctantly. Ambika and Ambalika reminisced about their past as they conversed in the royal palace. They recalled their childhood days, playing games with their sister Amba, growing up with carefree joy. They remembered how Bhishma single-handedly defeated many warriors in the Swayamvara, ultimately marrying them off to Vichitraveerya. The sudden demise of Vichitravirya led them to bear sons through the Niyoga tradition. Reflecting on these tumultuous twists, they pondered the meaning of their lives, intricately woven by Brahma, and their thoughts wandered toward the uncertainties of their future. Ambalika, expressing her lack of interest in life, revealed that she had only one remaining desire: to see her son Pandu coronated as the mighty Maharaja of the Kuru kingdom, and to witness his grand marriage to an extraordinarily beautiful princess. Hearing Ambalika's wish, Ambika's heart grew heavy, and her mind, laden with anxiety, was compelled to examine her own desires. Deeply troubled by the future of her son Dhritarashtra, she feared his blindness would bar him from obtaining a significant position in the Council of Ministers. She knew that Vidura, already renowned for his righteousness, would be declared the chief minister, and that the post of commander would never be given to a blind man. Consequently, Dhritarashtra would be excluded from political responsibilities, lacking any major role in the governance of the kingdom. His blindness would render him unable to detect the intrigues around him, leading to his marginalization. Ambika realized that there was only one way to safeguard her son's future. expansive open-air amphitheater reverberated with the cheers of thousands, eagerly awaiting the display of martial prowess from the warriors of various realms within the kingdom. The royal preceptor, Kripacharya, commenced the competitions. Bhishma, Satyavati, Ambika, and Ambalika, along with Kripacharya, were seated on the principal dais, observing the spectacle. On the other side of the arena, the contestants awaited their turn. Among them sat Dhritarashtra, brooding over the humiliation inflicted upon him by Pandu, resolute in his determination to prove to everyone that he was no less than Pandu. Vijura, always rational and compassionate, approached Dhritarashtra, who was supposed to be with the royal princes. He questioned the reason for Dhritarashtra's presence among the other warriors instead of being with them. In response, Dhritarashtra declared that he was going to prove to everyone that he could perform the feats that Pandu did with eyesight, even without it. Vijura, understanding his intent, cautioned him that the tumultuous cheers of thousands of people would make it impossible to focus, and if he failed, he would face great humiliation. Kripacharya stood up and announced that Prince Pandu, the finest archer in Bharatha continent, was about to showcase his extraordinary archery skills. The crowd erupted in applause for him. A ferocious elephant, twice the size of a normal one, stormed into the arena. The audience, witnessing the colossal creature, cheered in exhilaration. The enormous crowd gazed in awe as the bewildered elephant, startled by the arrows shot by Pandu, began to run in panic. Pandu, with remarkable swiftness, shot arrows alongside the elephant, constructing barricades on both sides. These barriers guided the elephant's path, controlling its movement. The spectators were mesmerized by Pandu's speed and precision, watching in astonishment. Maneuvering the elephant skillfully, Pandu directed it into the massive cage prepared for it. As soon as the elephant entered, the soldiers swiftly closed the gate. The crowd erupted in loud cheers, extolling Pandu's extraordinary archery skills. The arena resonated with their jubilant applause. After some time, once the cheers subsided, Dhritarashtra, from the other side of the assembly, loudly proclaimed that despite being blind, he too could demonstrate his prowess by controlling the mad elephant. Using the sound of the elephant as a guide, he broke the lock of the cage with a single spear. The elephant emerged from the cage and began to run. Along with the people, Kripacharya and Bhishma were astonished. Dhritarashtra, aiming based on the thunderous sound of the elephant's heavy footsteps, shot an arrow, injuring the beast. This further enraged the elephant, causing it to lose control and recklessly charge towards the crowd. Some soldiers, armed with chains, attempted to restrain the elephant, but they were unable to withstand its immense strength. Even though Pandu shot arrows to construct a barrier to control the elephant, this time the elephant easily broke through the barricade and charged towards the crowd. The people, panicked and running in fear, were about to face a grave danger. Seeing this, Bhishma, determined to prevent any harm to the citizens, prepared his bow to shoot the beast himself. As the furious elephant charged towards the crowd, it suddenly halted as its chain got caught on something incredibly strong. The people, astonished, looked on to see Dhritarashtra standing firm, holding the chain tied to the elephant. He began to pull the mighty beast in the opposite direction. The spectators were mesmerized by Dhritarashtra's immense strength. The elephant, reversing its course, charged furiously towards Dhritarashtra. With the thunderous echoes of the charging elephant, Dhritarashtra deftly utilized his skills, and in the split second before the massive beast could strike him, he expertly stepped onto its tusks, swiftly climbed atop its head, and with precise and extraordinary force delivered a powerful kick to its crown. Unable to withstand the blow, the enormous elephant, weighing nearly 2,000 pounds, collapsed to the ground. Dhritarashtra effortlessly pulled the massive beast with a chain and secured it back into its cage. The spectators, recovering from their astonishment, erupted into cheers, applauding his incredible strength. The public's admiration for Dhritarashtra's prowess filled Ambika with immense joy. Pandu felt relieved that his brother was unharmed. Krupacharya also felt at ease, knowing that the people were safe. The crowd, initially amazed by Pandu's archery skills, was now utterly captivated by Dhritarashtra's display of power, completely overshadowing Pandu's prowess. Dhritarashtra, having reclaimed the spotlight and demonstrating to nearly everyone in Hastinapura that he was more capable than Pandu, was elated with profound satisfaction. But Dhritarashtra's actions, which endangered the lives of the kingdom's citizens just to showcase his prowess, caused profound dissatisfaction not only in Bhishma, but also in Vidura. Kunti, while contemplating deeply on the mantra given to her by sage Durvasa, began to have doubts about its efficacy. She found herself in a quandary, unsure of which deity to summon to test the boon. Driven by an insatiable curiosity to validate the mantra, Kunti decided to go to the sacred Ganges River for a solitary bath, a departure from her usual practice of being accompanied by maidservants. As she immersed herself in the holy waters of the Ganges, she looked up at the radiant rising sun. The brilliance of the sun filled her with an inexplicable joy. Within her mind, she chanted the mantra given by Durvasa and invoked the sun god. No sooner had she completed the mantra than the sun god manifested before her in human form. Kunti was struck with awe and disbelief, unable to fathom the reality before her eyes. A surge of fear enveloped her as she realized that the sun god was about to bestow a child upon her. The thought of bearing a child as an unmarried woman filled her with dread. The impending act felt like a grievous sin. Realizing the gravity of her actions, she feared the severe judgment she would face from society. Not only would she be shamed, but her entire family and future generations would also be subjected to disgrace. Filled with immediate remorse, Kunti apologized to the sun god, explaining that her intention was merely to test the mantra's power, not to conceive a child with him. The sun god, understanding her plight, responded that once summoned by the mantra, he was bound to fulfill its purpose. However, he reassured her that she would not lose her virginity, nor would she have to carry the child for 9 months. The child would be born immediately through Satyogarbham, ensuring that her and her family's honor would remain intact. Realizing that she had no option but to accept the child from the sun god, Kunti was compelled to acknowledge the divine offspring bestowed upon her. Placing the infant inside a golden chest, the sun god then vanished from her sight. With a heart intertwined with intense confusion and fear, Kunti gazed upon her firstborn. The baby, with an enchanting face and radiant golden armor and earrings, filled her with a momentary forgetfulness of her fears and societal norms. For a brief instant, Kunti held her child close, showering him with maternal love. Gradually, sorrow engulfed her heart, Torn between her love for the child and her dread of facing society as an unwed mother, she endured a profound internal struggle. Seeking the strength to withstand this emotional turmoil, she implored the divine for resilience. With a heart-wrenching resolve, Kunti placed her child back in the golden chest and set it adrift in the Ganges River, then returned to the palace, her soul heavy with anguish. By the sacred banks of the Ganga River, within the expansive dominion of the Kuru dynasty, resided Athiratha Nandana, a charioteer, along with his devoted wife Radha. The kingdom had been without an emperor for an extended period, causing all those in royal service to endure meager wages for many years. Thus, amid the tribulations of poverty, their modest earnings sufficed only for their sustenance, allowing them to live without losing their dignity. Their grief was not born of financial struggles, but from the absence of a child to complete their family. Each day, Athiratha would perform his morning ablutions in the holy waters of the Ganga, and with a heart brimming with devotion and eyes filled with hope, he fervently prayed to the resplendent sun god, beseeching him for the boon of progeny. The emptiness in their home weighed heavier on their hearts than their empty pockets. Despite their longing for a child, Radha harbored a profound fear, coupled with an unending anxiety about how they would nurture a child with their limited means. She expressed her sorrows to Athiratha, suggesting that he petition their financial woes to the royal family. But Athiratha hesitated to ask for money without work. Like many others in the kingdom, he eagerly awaited the announcement of the king's coronation and the prince's marriages. Such grand events created opportunities for everyone. Farmers supplying food, flower vendors, artisans, weavers, jewelers, entertainers, and all kinds of small to great businessmen in the kingdom. These majestic royal celebrations brought prosperity, providing a temporary respite and wealth, eagerly anticipated by those who struggled daily for their livelihood. With hesitant heart, Ambika reached Satyavati's chamber and sought permission to reveal her emotions. Sensing an important matter due to this unusual request, Satyavati granted her consent. Ambika referenced Dhritarashtra's display of strength in the assembly, lamenting that if he were not blind, undoubtedly, there would be no greater warrior in the entire Bharata continent. Concealing her guilt from showing on her face, Satyavati agreed with this truth. Ambika expressed the irony that in this world, one person's mistakes result in another's punishment, lamenting that although she was the one who closed her eyes during the Niyoga ritual, it was her son who bore the penalty. Understanding Ambika's anguish, Satyavati consoled her, sharing the deep-seated sorrow she had carried for years. She revealed that indirectly, she was the reason for the prince's defects. Instead of marrying a capable king and bearing healthy sons, Ambika and Ambalika married Vichitravirya. Following his untimely demise, they reluctantly had to follow the Niyoga process, resulting in Dhritarashtra being born blind. Satyavati consoled Ambika, acknowledging that she was the primary cause of these events, as it was she who brought the princesses and commanded the Niyoga. Ambika, agreeing with Satyavati, lamented that they both were responsible for the tragic life of Dhritarashtra. To prevent Dhritarashtra's life from becoming even more ruinous in the future, Ambika suggested Satyavati had to take a different decision, a way to rectify their past mistakes. She asserted that Dhritarashtra, being blind, might fail as a commander or a grand minister, but he would excel as a sovereign ruler. Dhritarashtra possessed all the qualities needed for a ruler. He was righteous, exhibited extraordinary intelligence in decision-making, and was an expert in war strategies and political maneuvers. Such a person as a king would have Pandu, an adept in military skills and leadership, serving as the ideal commander of Hastinapura's vast army, while the ever-righteous Vijura would guide the council as the grand minister. Ambika elucidated that forming a strong triumvirate, honoring the capabilities of the three princes, would ensure a prosperous future for Hastinapura. This arrangement would not only do justice to the three princes, but also allow them to atone for their past mistakes by restoring Dhritarashtra's honor and sovereignty, thereby redeeming their sins. Since the death of Vichitravirya, Satyavati had been burdened with deep remorse. Hearing Ambika's proposal, she felt a semblance of relief and decided to take this chance to rectify past mistakes. Bhishma, reflecting on Dhritarashtra's arrogant actions, discerned his ambition for the throne. Resolute, he decided it was time to coronate Pandu without delay. However, Satyavati approached Bhishma, expressing her opinion that Dhritarashtra should be the next king. This unexpected turn of events left Bhishma astonished. He reminded her that, according to Dharma, a person with a physical disability could never be king, and that he couldn't go against this principle. Additionally, Bhishma highlighted that someone willing to endanger the kingdom's people to prove his valor was unfit to rule. Anticipating Bhishma's response, Satyavati elaborated on her rationale. Dhritarashtra's strong desire to become king was evident during the competition. This ambition might stem from his insecurity about his blindness or his resolve to prove his capability. If Pandu were to become king, Dhritarashtra's discontent could lead to factionalism among the ministers and potentially a civil war. Pandu, who had never desired the throne, would gladly accept Dhritarashtra as king, thus preventing civil unrest and ensuring the presence of a capable commander and minister under Dhritarashtra's rule. Bhishma remained steadfast in his refusal to contravene Dharma. Satyavati, reminding Bhishma of his oath to serve the throne of Hastinapura, commanded him as the queen regent to honor her decision. Even the illustrious Bhishma could not defy the queen regent's mandate. After a moment's reflection, Bhishma expressed his concern that Dhritarashtra, perceiving Pandu and Vijura as rivals, might be reluctant to appoint them as commander and grand minister once he ascends to the throne. Thus, he suggested that Pandu and Vijura should first be appointed to their respective positions, and only then should Dhritarashtra be coronated as king. Recognizing the prudence in Bhishma's words, Satyavati agreed to this plan. As Dhritarashtra basked in the triumph of his formidable display, Vijura approached him. Vijura extolled Dhritarashtra, stating that by shooting arrows with precision based solely on sound, he had accomplished an unparalleled feat, which is considered next to impossible. Believing that Vijura was praising him, Dhritarashtra listened silently with a faint smile. Typically, after mastering a skill through arduous practice and determination, humans experience immense joy. But Dhritarashtra did not feel such elation. because the same achievement had been accomplished by Pandu, whom he considered inferior. Consequently, driven by the desire to surpass Pandu, Dhritarashtra had recklessly placed the people in perilous situations merely to validate his own abilities. Vichitravirya warned him that all of this stemmed from an insidious envy growing within him towards Pandu. If he did not relinquish his arrogance and acknowledge this envy, it would become a permanent and detrimental trait within his character. Expecting accolades from Vichitravirya, Dhritarashtra could not endure the counsel. With anger, he retorted that Pandu was no contender of his and lashed out at Vichitravirya. Dhritarashtra, with a voice brimming with pride, declared that he had sought to change the perspective of those who pitied him as a hapless blind man, and had achieved what he set out to do. Overhearing the conversation, Pandu gently agreed with Dhritarashtra, asserting that he was indeed no match for him. Already incensed, Dhritarashtra cut Pandu off, stating that he did not need Pandu's affirmation, and was not naive enough to believe in Pandu's feigned humility. Dhritarashtra accused Pandu of conspiring to make him appear incapable while painting himself as a great warrior in everyone's minds, thereby scheming to seize the throne, which was his birthright. Hearing the harsh words from his beloved brother, Pandu felt immense sorrow. Reflecting deeply, he castigated himself, wondering if his actions had caused such distress to Dhritarashtra. In a bid to bring peace to his elder brother's heart, he earnestly explained that he harbored no desire for the throne and had only wished to see his elder brother as a victor and a greater person than himself. Despite Pandu's sincere explanation, Dhritarashtra remained unconvinced, leaving Pandu with a lingering sense of regret. At that moment, an informant arrived, informing them that Bhishma had summoned for Vichitravirya. It was announced in the kingdom that the coronation of the new Maharaja would take place in a fortnight. This news brought immense joy to Athiratha and the entire populace of the realm. As per his daily routine, Athiratha bathed in the sacred waters of the Ganga, purifying his body, praying, as always, for the blessing of offspring. Upon opening his eyes, he noticed a golden chest floating serenely on the pristine surface of the river, slowly drifting towards him. With curiosity, he carefully retrieved it and brought it to the shore. Glancing around to see if anyone else might claim it, and finding none, he opened the chest. To his astonishment, inside lay a radiant infant adorned with golden armor and earrings, surrounded by gold coins and jewelry. It took a moment for his mind to comprehend the reality before him. Realizing the truth, he expressed profound gratitude to the sun god for hearing his prayers and responding in such a wondrous manner. He hurried home to show the precious gift to his wife, Radha, and share the joyous news. Radha's heart overflowed with boundless happiness. She seemed to be the happiest person in the world to Athiratha. This child not only resolved their issue of childlessness, but also alleviated their financial struggles with the gold and jewels within the chest. In the northwestern direction of Bharatha continent, the kingdom of Gandhara was ruled by the illustrious King Sabala, renowned for his unwavering adherence to Dharma, his righteous conduct, and exceptional leadership qualities. Subala was blessed with 11 daughters and 1 son. His eldest daughter, Gandhari, was celebrated for her profound devotion to Lord Shiva from a young age. She harbored an unwavering desire to behold the divine form of Lord Shiva with her own eyes. With unyielding devotion, she performed various rituals and pujas every day in her tender years. One day, Gandhari, seeking guidance from her father, expressed her ardent desire to see the divine form of Lord Shiva and inquired about the way to achieve this. Subala, acknowledging her devotion, informed her that such a vision could be attained through rigorous penance. Despite feeling deep anxiety about his daughter's arduous journey, Subala, fortified by his faith in Lord Shiva's grace, gave his consent to Gandhari's fervent wish. With stubborn determination and a heart full of devotion, Gandhari journeyed to the Himalayas and commenced her tapasya. She engaged in severe penance, seeking food and water for years. In her consciousness, there was nothing but an unwavering dedication to Lord Shiva, rendering physical needs like hunger and sleep non-existent. Moved by her steadfast devotion, Lord Shiva, in the very form Gandhari had envisioned him throughout the years, appeared before her. With a heart brimming with devotional ecstasy, she expressed her desire to have 101 children. Lord Shiva, pleased with her unwavering penance, granted her the boon, bestowing upon her the blessing of 101 children. The grand coronation ceremony of the king of Hastinapura commenced with great pomp and splendor, announcing the unparalleled prowess and strategic acumen of Pandu. The royal preceptor Kripacharya declared him as the commander-in-chief of Hastinapura's vast army. The ministers and royal preceptors expressed their approval, and Queen Mother Satyavati adorned Pandu with the crown of the commander, solidifying his position. Vidura, renowned for his righteousness, virtuousness, and sagacity, was proclaimed the Grand Minister of Hastinapura by Kripacharya. Satyavati then adorned him with the crown of the Grand Minister, acknowledging his wisdom and integrity. Finally, the moment to coronate Dhritarashtra as king approached. As the rituals began, Grand Minister Vidura stepped forward and voiced his objection. Citing the principles of Dharma, he declared that a person with physical impairment should never ascend the throne. This unexpected development left the assembly in astonishment. In a resolute tone, Vidura declared that appointing a disabled person as king is against Dharma, and to uphold his oath as the Grand Minister, he could not condone such a dharma. His words ignited intense anger in Dhritarashtra, and a profound silence descended upon the assembly, filled with ministers and royal preceptors. Ambika, with fervor, argued with Vidura, reminding him that according to Dharma, the firstborn always ascends the throne. Vidura, responding respectfully, clarified that when all sons are equal, the firstborn becomes the king. However, when the firstborn is blind, the next in line should ascend the throne. Explaining the reason for not voicing his objections earlier, Vidura said that as a brother, he was bound by familial loyalty to support the decision of making Dhritarashtra the king. But now, as the Grand Minister, his primary duty was to uphold Dharma over personal opinions or familial ties. Satyavati found herself ensnared in a moral quandary, torn between her duty and the tenets of Dharma. She realized that insisting on making Dhritarashtra the king would mean endorsing an act of adharma as the queen mother. She accepted the inevitable truth that crowning Pandu as king was the only path forward. As Dhritarashtra's dreams of royal authority shattered, he burned with humiliation and anger, believing this to be a conspiracy hatched by Vichitra and Pandu. With these thoughts tormenting his mind, he stormed out of the assembly. On the other hand, Pandu, who had never desired the throne, was filled with profound sorrow. The notion that Dhritarashtra suspected him of politicking for the throne only deepened his regret, knowing this incident had widened the irreparable rift between them. Unable to reject the elder's decision and to uphold the principles of Dharma, Pandu reluctantly accepted his duty. The halted coronation ceremony resumed, with Kripacharya proclaiming Pandu as the king of Hastinapura. Satyavati adorned him with the royal crown. After a flurry of unseen political maneuvers and secret dealings, the kingdom was shrouded in uncertainty until the very last moment about who would ascend the throne. Despite Ambika's manipulations aimed at swaying Satyavati, and Bhishma's clandestine conspiring with Vichitra against the Queen Mother's decision, the final outcome remained unpredictable. In the end, it was Pandu who ascended the throne, marking the conclusion of a turbulent and suspenseful succession saga. Ambika and Ambalika watched with mixed emotions as Pandu ascended the throne. King Pandu vowed to perform his duties with purity of heart and in adherence to Dharma. In the snow-clad Himalayas, as the evening twilight descended, 3 young sages trudged forward with their tired bodies. They were on a quest, under their guru Agniveshya's orders, to find the rare Samarosa herbs, which could only be found in the Himalayan regions. The distant howls of wolves echoed in their ears, a harbinger of impending danger. In a bid to ward off the approaching menace, they dashed into the forest, seeking to light a fire. However, due to the pervasive snow, they found no dry wood to ignite. As the wolf howls grew closer, their hearts pounded with fear. They gathered some wood from the surrounding trees and tried to create fire by rubbing the sticks together. Despite their efforts, the dampness thwarted their attempts. Initially, the howls had come from one direction, but now they echoed from all sides, making the sages realize that the wolves had surrounded them. Terror gripped their spines as they saw the gleaming eyes of the wolves in the rapidly darkening forest. The sight of those eyes sent chills down their spines, and they frantically continued their futile attempts to produce fire by rubbing the sticks. Realizing that igniting the wood was impossible, they were paralyzed with fear. Though their bows and arrows were within reach, terror prevented them from considering an attack. They resigned themselves to what they believed were their final moments. Slowly, the wolves emerged from the darkness, their fierce eyes and sharp teeth glistening. The sages could almost feel the impending pain of those fangs tearing into their flesh. Just as despair was about to engulf them, a fiery arrow sliced through the air and landed on the wood they had arranged, instantly igniting a blazing fire. The sudden flames startled the wolves, causing them to flee into the darkness. Astonished, the sages looked towards the direction from which the fiery arrow had come. There, standing heroically atop a tree with a charming smile, was a solitary figure with his bow poised. was their friend Drona, who had been separated from their group earlier. Recognizing their friend, the sages felt a profound sense of relief. Drona descended from the tree and showed them the somarasa herbs he had already collected. The sages, overjoyed, expressed their heartfelt gratitude to Drona for saving their lives. Drona graciously accepted their thanks with a friendly demeanor. With their mission accomplished, the following morning, they began their return journey to Agniveshya's ashram. After Drupada left the ashram, Drona immersed himself deeply in the study of the Vedas and Upanishads, dedicating himself as an eternal student, constantly seeking knowledge. His insatiable quest for wisdom eventually led him to the esteemed ashram of Agniveshya, where Drona mastered the powerful secrets of the Agnayastra under the revered sage's guidance. During this period, Drona married Kripi, the sister of the sage Kripacharya. Until then, Drona had lived a life free of material desires, finding joy and fulfillment in his spiritual and scholarly pursuits. However, with the arrival of his wife, the harsh realities of financial insufficiency began to weigh heavily on him. Despite his deep contentment with Vedic knowledge, the responsibility of providing for his family became paramount. Hearing that the legendary warrior and divine incarnation Parashurama was generously bestowing donations upon those in need, Drona, who had never sought help even in the most trying times, felt compelled to request at least one cow from Parashurama to sustain his family. With eager anticipation, Drona traveled to Parashurama's ashram. Upon arrival, he was mesmerized by the incarnation of Lord Vishnu himself, the divine presence of Parashurama. The radiant aura emanating from Parashurama left Drona awestruck. Without any formal introduction, Drona instinctively recognized the divine essence of Parashurama. Drona approached Parashurama with deep reverence, respectfully bowing before him. He explained his dire situation, humbly requesting that even a single cow would greatly aid him and his wife in their survival. Parashurama, having already given away all his possessions, did not wish to send Drona away empty-handed. He informed Drona that he had nothing left to give except his own physical body, his weapons, and his extensive knowledge of divine supernatural weapons, and offered Drona the choice of any of these. Drona, possessing a profound appreciation for knowledge, immediately grasped the immense significance of Parashurama's offer. Overwhelmed with joy, he realized that a king who rules the land is molded by his guru. A righteous king ensures the prosperity of his kingdom, allied relationship with his neighboring territories, and ultimately establishes peace and prosperity in the entire earth. Conversely, wicked rulers bring turmoil and devastation. A guru, through imparting knowledge and wisdom, shapes the character of the king, and thus holds the power to determine the fate of the earth. Drona, who had come seeking a cow to support his family, found himself being offered the incredible opportunity to shape the future of the world. He enthusiastically accepted Parashurama's proposition, recognizing it as an unparalleled blessing. Drona chose to receive Parashurama's knowledge of astras, joining him as a disciple. Under Parashurama's tutelage, Drona embarked on a journey of training and enlightenment, embracing his new role with fervor and dedication. After the coronation of Pandu as king, Bhishma's thoughts turned towards the future stability of Hastinapura. The past events had instilled a fear in his mind. The situation faced when Vichitravirya died without an heir had left a lasting impression on him. To soothe Dhritarashtra and to divert his growing enmity towards Pandu and Vijura, Bhishma decided that a marriage would be the best course of action for him. Bhishma, believing that Dhritarashtra's wounded pride from not securing the throne could find solace in a marriage, called upon Vijura to discuss this intention. Vijura, agreeing with Bhishma's decision, suggested the name of Gandhari, the daughter of King Subala of Gandhara kingdom, who possessed the boon to have 101 children. This proposal not only provided a strategic advantage, but also alleviated Bhishma's concerns about the continuity of the royal lineage. Dhritarashtra, publicly humiliated for his blindness being cited as a disqualification for rulership, seethed in deep sorrow and anger within his chambers, replaying the coronation scene repeatedly in his mind. Despite his numerous qualifications and capabilities, he felt that injustice had ultimately prevailed. Every time he thought about the suppression he faced, it felt like a sharp blade piercing his heart. Vijura's cutting words echoed in his ears, and his heart ached not just from losing the throne, but from the betrayal by those closest to him. His inner world was a tumult of rage, grief, and despair. His mother, Ambika, entered the room and, seeing her son in such a distressed state, felt a profound sadness in her heart. She approached him gently and conveyed the marriage proposal from Bhishma. But Dhritarashtra, already engulfed in sorrow, immediately rejected the proposal. Ambika sat with Dhritarashtra and explained that the young Princess Gandhari possessed a boon to have 101 children. Hearing this, a glimmer of hope sparked in Dhritarashtra's heart. The thought that if he were to have 101 offspring, his lineage would outnumber and dominate Pandu's children in the future generation, securing dominance and potentially reclaiming the throne, took root in his mind. With this realization, Dhritarashtra perceived the marriage as a strategic move to ensure and fortify his lineage's future. With newfound resolve and strategic foresight, he accepted the marriage proposal, seeing it as a path to secure a favorable and strong future for himself and his descendants. After Dhritarashtra's reluctant acceptance of the marriage proposal, Bhishma, ever the stalwart guardian of Hastinapura's interests, decided to personally journey to the kingdom of Gandhara. He believed that this delicate matter required his direct involvement rather than a mere message, especially considering the sensitive nature of Dhritarashtra's blindness. Bhishma understood that a proposal of this magnitude, involving the marriage of a princess to a blind prince, necessitated a clear and compassionate explanation to King Subala and Queen Sudharma. Gandhari received the news from her handmaiden that the venerable Bhishma was arriving to discuss a marriage proposal. Upon hearing this, Gandhari's heart swelled with joy and anticipation. She began to dream about her future husband, envisioning a life filled with grandeur and love. Although she knew that Hastinapura was a kingdom of great repute and splendor, she was unaware of the specific details about its royal family or its customs. Nonetheless, her imagination took flight, and she pictured the prince of Hastinapura as the embodiment of her dreams. In her mind's eye, he was a paragon of virtue, strength, and nobility, an ideal match for her own steadfast spirit and aspirations. Gandhari's thoughts were consumed with the possibilities of her new life. She envisioned a prince who would be not only a stalwart leader, but also a compassionate partner. The prospect of joining such a revered kingdom filled her with a sense of purpose and excitement, and she eagerly awaited Bhishma's arrival, hoping that her dreams would soon become a reality. Bhishma, upon reaching the gates of Gandhara, was received with great honor, as befitting his legendary status and the importance of his mission. In the guest chambers of Gandhara, King Subala and his wife Sudharma respected him warmly, and customary courtesies were exchanged. Bhishma was invited to speak of the purpose of his visit. As they already know that this was a marriage proposal, Bhishma began to speak of the virtues of Vichitravirya's eldest son, Dhritarashtra, extolling his unparalleled strength, unwavering dedication to Dharma, and his extraordinary ability to shoot arrows guided by sound alone. Gandhari listened intently, her heart swelling with joy as she envisioned Dhritarashtra as her future husband. Just as her dreams began to take shape, Bhishma, with a heavy heart, revealed the unfortunate truth that Dhritarashtra was blind. A sudden wave of sadness washed over King Subala and Queen Sudharma. From behind, a voice rang out in anger. Shakuni, Subala's son, furious at the perceived deception, he accused Bhishma of highlighting Dhritarashtra's noble qualities only to reveal his blindness as an afterthought. Bhishma, who had anticipated such a reaction, stood silent, his expression serene yet solemn. King Subala, recognizing the necessity of decorum, swiftly stopped Shakuni and sent him away, restoring a tense calm to the room. Shakuni entered Gandhari's chamber and was shocked. He found Gandhari's eyes were blindfolded. Stunned, Shakuni asked what this was about. Gandhari explained that she had already envisioned Dhritarashtra as her husband, and now she couldn't imagine another. Since he was blind, she didn't want anyone to say that she had something her husband didn't have. She didn't want anyone to see her husband as unequal or inferior to her. So, she decided to live without her sight, making herself equal to her husband. Shakuni was deeply saddened and pleaded with his sister to reconsider her sacrifice. But she firmly said that her decision was already made. Shakuni was filled with sorrow, and at the same time he hated this marriage proposal by Bhishma and saw him as the one responsible for his sister's sacrifice. As the reality of Gandhari's decision to blindfold herself sank in, her 10 younger sisters were overcome with sorrow. Tears streamed down their faces as they imagined the life ahead for their beloved sister, now shrouded in perpetual darkness. Gandhari had been more than a sister to them. She was a nurturing figure, almost like a mother. From their earliest days, she had guided and cared for them, and they loved her with all their hearts. Seeing their beloved sister willingly embrace such a sacrifice, the younger sisters felt an unbearable weight on their hearts. They couldn't imagine leaving Gandhari to face this new life alone. The thought of her navigating the world without sight, struggling to complete even the simplest tasks, filled them with anguish. They wanted to be by her side, to assist her in every possible way, and to ensure that she never felt alone or helpless. Bhishma and Subala, moved by the scene of the sisters' tearful pleas, tried to convince Gandhari to reconsider her decision. They argued that she could still be a dutiful wife without blinding herself, that her love and dedication did not need such a drastic expression. But Gandhari, steadfast in her resolve, gently but firmly refused to change her mind. Seeing that Gandhari would not be swayed, her sisters tearfully begged their father, King Subala, to allow them to accompany her. They could not bear the thought of leaving their sister in such a condition. They felt a deep need to support her, to live with her, and to ensure she was never left alone in her darkness. Subala, overwhelmed by his daughter's love and devotion, made a heart-wrenching decision. With a heavy heart, he resolved to marry all his 11 daughters to Dhritarashtra. He knew this was an unusual choice, but it was born out of a father's desire to protect and preserve the unity and happiness of his daughters. When Subala shared his decision with Bhishma, he was initially shocked. The idea of marrying all the daughters to one man, especially under these circumstances, was unexpected. But as Subala explained his reasoning, Bhishma began to understand the deep love and protective instinct that drove Subala's decision. It wasn't merely a matter of convenience or politics. It was a decision rooted in the profound bonds of family and the desire to ensure that no sister would be left behind. Ultimately, Bhishma respected Subala's decision, recognizing the noble intentions behind it. Thus, with both sorrow and acceptance, the decision was made, binding not just Gandhari, but all her sisters to Dhritarashtra, ensuring that they would face the future together, united in their love and devotion. Shakuni, overwhelmed with sorrow, felt a deeper pain than anyone else in his family as he watched his sister's dreams shatter in a single day. They had all imagined a future filled with happiness and love, only to see it destroyed by Bhishma's actions. The sight of his beloved sisters, especially Gandhari, sacrificing their dreams and blinding themselves to stand by their sister, filled him with a grief that quickly twisted into a desire for revenge. Shakuni realized that killing Bhishma would be impossible. Instead, he vowed to make Bhishma feel the same anguish his family was enduring. He resolved to strike at what Bhishma cherished most, Hastinapura and its dynasty. Shakuni's sorrow transformed into a cold, calculating resolve to bring down the kingdom that Bhishma had devoted his life to protecting, ensuring that Bhishma would suffer the same deep pain that now consumed his family. With a heavy heart and a mind set on revenge, personally escorted his 11 sisters to Hastinapura for the marriage. The wedding of Dhritarashtra to Gandhari and her 10 sisters was conducted with great splendor. King Subala and Queen Sudharma watched the grand event with mixed emotions, torn between the joy of seeing their daughters wed and the sorrow of the circumstances. Bhishma, Satyavati, Ambika, Ambalika, Pandu, and Vijura all witnessed the ceremony with immense happiness, believing they were securing a strong future for the kingdom. Meanwhile, Shakuni stood silently, his heart burning with a singular thought of revenge, as he watched the union that would forever change the fate of Hastinapura. Jarasandha, the formidable son of King Bruhadrata, reigned over the powerful Magadha kingdom with an iron grip. Blessed with supernatural strength, he was not content with merely ruling Magadha. He sought to expand his empire across the Bharata continent. However, Jarasandha was no ordinary conqueror. He devised a unique and cunning strategy to extend his dominion, a wrestling duel challenge issued to the kings of other kingdoms. The winner would claim the loser's kingdom, armies, and treasures. If the king was older in age or not physically strong enough to fight, Jarasandha would allow them to choose a champion from their kingdom to face him in combat. This method of warfare was both bold and brutal, yet it found acceptance among many kings. They believed that by accepting Jarasandha's challenge, they could avoid the large-scale bloodshed that traditional wars entailed. Moreover, no king wanted to be branded a coward by his people for refusing the challenge. Thus, Jarasandha's strategy allowed him to conquer vast territories with no loss, his supernatural strength overwhelming all who dared face him. Kingdom after kingdom fell, and their armies were absorbed into Magadha's ranks, making Jarasandha's force one of the largest in Bharata, standing second next to Hastinapura. Jarasandha's strategy was as shrewd as it was ruthless. Over time, he amassed immense wealth and power without losing a single soldier. His mind, as sharp as his physical prowess, conceived a grander plan to encircle Hastinapura, the heart of Bharata, with his own kingdoms. But Jarasandha was wary of trusting the kings he had defeated, fearing they might one day rise against him. Therefore, he installed his loyal men as rulers of these conquered lands, ensuring their allegiance to Magadha. But to completely encircle Hastinapura, Jarasandha needed strong allies who could control the regions beyond his reach. His gaze turned southward towards the prosperous kingdom of Vidarbha. Recognizing its strategic importance, he sent vast amounts of gold and treasures to the king of Vidarbha, forging a powerful alliance. This alliance not only solidified Jarasandha's hold over the southern regions, but also brought him closer to his ultimate goal of surrounding Hastinapura, isolating it, and eventually crushing its power. In this way, Jarasandha's brilliance as a strategist was matched only by his physical might. He was not merely a conqueror, but a mastermind, slowly tightening his grip around Hastinapura, preparing for the day when it too would fall under his control. By the time Hastinapura realized Jarasandha's strategy, it was already too late. Bhishma found himself in deep contemplation, pondering how to counter Jarasandha's cunning plan. It was during this period that Hastinapura received an invitation from Kunthi for the Swayamvara of his daughter Kunthi. Bhishma immediately recognized this as a golden opportunity to secure an ally in the south. Positioned south of Hastinapura and north of Vidarbha, Kunthi kingdom would serve as a crucial buffer and an invaluable ally. Bhishma shared his insight with King Pandu and Grand Minister Vichitravirya. Pandu, understanding the strategic importance, saw this as a chance not only to strengthen ties with Kunthi but also to counter Jarasandha's encroaching influence. With this in mind, Pandu resolved to attend Kunthi Swayamvara, fully aware of the potential alliance it could forge. Kunthi, who carried a deep, haunting secret within her heart, the memory of a son she had borne and left to the mercy of the river, lived with a heavy burden of guilt. The pain of that decision lingered, a shadow that never left her. No matter how much she tried to push it into the recesses of her mind, each day the guilt gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the life she had given away. Yet, life in the royal household demanded strength and composure. Kunti knew she had to move on, to bury the past and fulfill her duties. When the time came for her Swayamvara, she reluctantly accepted the reality that awaited her. The prospect of choosing a husband and starting a new chapter in her life seemed daunting, but she steeled herself, determined to face the future with grace. Despite the inner turmoil, Kunti understood that this was her destiny. A chance to rebuild and find solace in a new bond, even as the memories of her past continued to weigh heavily on her soul. The Swayamvara was not just a ritual for her, it was a step toward redemption, a way to seek peace in the life she had yet to live. The grand hall of the Swayamvara was adorned with opulence, filled with the finest kings and princes from across the lands, each vying for the hand of the radiant princess, Kunti. The air was thick with anticipation as Kunti entered, her heart pounding beneath the layers of her royal attire. This was not just a moment of choice, it was a moment that would define her destiny. As she walked past the assembled royalty, her eyes scanned each face with care. The crowd fell silent, every man hoping to catch her gaze, to see a flicker of interest that might lead to a future as her consort. Yet, her heart remained unmoved until her eyes fell upon Pandu. There was something about him, his calm demeanor, the quiet strength in his eyes, that resonated deeply within her. It was as if the storm that had raged in her heart for so long suddenly stilled, leaving behind a tranquil sea. In that instant, Kunti knew it wasn't just a choice, it was fate. With a grace befitting her royal lineage, she approached Pandu, her steps purposeful yet gentle. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, bound by an unspoken connection. As she stood before him, their eyes met, and for a moment, time itself seemed to stand still. Without hesitation, Kunti lifted the garland, her hands steady as she placed it around Pandu's neck. The crowd erupted in applause, but for Kunti, all that existed was the serene certainty that she had found her true partner. In Pandu, she had not only chosen a husband, but also found the peace and stability her heart had long yearned for. The weight of her past seemed to lift, replaced by the promise of a new beginning. Pandu and Kunti were married in a grand ceremony that was celebrated with great joy and splendor. Kunthibhoja, deeply satisfied with the union, sent his beloved daughter to Hastinapura with Pandu, bestowing upon them vast treasures and wealth as a symbol of his blessing and support. Upon their return to Hastinapura, King Pandu, understanding the significance of divine favor in his reign, performed a grand yagnam with his wife Kunti by the suggestions of royal gurus. The yagnam was intended to eliminate any negative energies that might obstruct their path and to invoke the blessings of the gods for strength and prosperity in the rule ahead. In the grand hall of Hastinapura, a palpable sense of urgency gripped the room. King Pandu sat at the head of the council, surrounded by the venerable Bhishma, the wise Vijura, the royal preceptor Kripacharya, and the other key ministers. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the weight of the kingdom's future pressing down on them all. King Pandu, his gaze resolute, contemplated the gravity of the situation before him. The expansionist ambitions of Jarasandha were no longer just a distant threat, but a looming reality that could soon encircle Hastinapura. The kingdom will face the dire possibility of being isolated and overwhelmed by the sheer power of Jarasandha's conquests soon. So, decisive action was now not just necessary but inevitable. Bhishma, ever the strategist, was the first to form his thoughts. The need for a strong and unwavering response was clear in his mind. The gathering of allies and the identification of foes had to be the kingdom's priority. The mere show of strength could deter wavering loyalties and force kingdoms to choose their side wisely. Vijura, always the voice of wisdom and prudence, recognized the balance that needed to be struck. Hastinapura's strength lay not just in its military might, but also in its ability to forge alliances through diplomacy. He thought of sending emissaries to neighboring kingdoms to demand their allegiance or confirm their loyalty, thereby avoiding unnecessary bloodshed. Kripacharya, with his vast knowledge of war and tactics, acknowledged the need for swift and decisive action. Those who refused to align with Hastinapura could not be allowed to linger as potential threats. The kingdom's might had to be demonstrated, leaving no room for dissent to spread among those who might harbor ambitions against Hastinapura. King Pandu, reflecting on the counsel of his advisors, understood the path that lay ahead. A conquest was to be the cornerstone of their strategy. Before plunging into war, Hastinapura would first seek to solidify its alliances. Messages would be sent to the kingdoms, demanding their allegiance or confronting their defiance. Those who chose to defy Hastinapura's power would soon face the might of its armies. The Council of Ministers swiftly carried out the king's orders. And soon the sound of horns blaring through Hastinapura's streets signaled the call to arms. Armor was donned, weapons were readied, and the mighty Hastinapura army began to gather, its numbers swelling with each passing hour. The city's walls echoed with the rhythm of drums, a powerful beat that stirred the hearts of the warriors preparing for battle. Meanwhile, Pandu visited his brother Dhritarashtra, who had been seething with anger. In their conversation, Pandu sensed the immense pain and suffering Dhritarashtra had endured and was still enduring. With a compassionate heart, Pandu informed Dhritarashtra of his decision to appoint him as the king of Hastinapura during Pandu's forthcoming conquest. Dhritarashtra was taken aback by this unexpected gesture and suddenly realized that he had misjudged Pandu all these days. The announcement of his kingship in Pandu's stead filled Dhritarashtra with both happiness and a sense of honor. But Shakuni, who observed this interaction closely, keenly understood the complex emotions now brewing within Dhritarashtra. Pandu, standing at the forefront of the vast army, his presence a testament to the strength and wisdom guiding Hastinapura. Kunti's heart was gripped with fear as her husband Pandu embarked on his invasion immediately after their marriage. Shakuni approached the jubilant Dhritarashtra and subtly undermined his newfound happiness. He pointed out that Dhritarashtra was overlooking the reality of the situation, explaining that this temporary kingship was nothing more than a token gesture, thrown to him like scraps to prey. Shakuni's words began to sow seeds of doubt in Dhritarashtra's mind. Although Dhritarashtra initially felt a sense of warmth towards his brother, he started reconsidering the situation through Shakuni's lens. As Shakuni's words took root, Dhritarashtra began to see the offer as part of a larger strategy, designed to pacify him rather than genuinely honor him. Anger surged within him, and he contemplated rejecting the kingship outright. But Shakuni warned him against such a move, explaining that it would only serve to elevate Pandu's reputation further. By refusing, Dhritarashtra would appear arrogant and ungrateful, making Pandu look even greater in the eyes of the people. Shakuni advised that they should outmaneuver Pandu's cunning strategy instead. Blinded by anger and influenced by Shakuni's reasoning, Dhritarashtra agreed, allowing his resentment to fester. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Pandu raised his sword, a signal to his army that the time for action had come. With a unified roar, the army marched forward, ready to defend their kingdom and conquer those who dared to challenge Hastinapura's supremacy. Jarasandha, employing his wrestling duel strategy, successfully conquered the kingdom of Tamralipti, which lay to the south of Magadha. With this victory, he continued his conquest, swiftly subjugating the kingdoms of Bodhagaya, Vanga, Thasali, Lubini, Kapilavattsa, and Haiti. These victories allowed Jarasandha to gain control over the entire eastern region. Since the challenge was based on one-on-one wrestling duels, the armies of these defeated kingdoms were now integrated into the Magadha forces, significantly expanding Jarasandha's military power, treasures, and territorial control. Furthermore, his strategic alliance with Vidarbha granted him influence over the southern kingdoms. Vidarbha's dominance over Maski, Saitya, and Kopobola solidified Jarasandha's control over the entire southwestern regions, making his empire vast and formidable. Jarasandha's both mothers hailed from Kashi, which was also the birthplace of Ambika and Ambalika. Despite these familial ties to Hastinapura, the current king of Kashi had a direct and strong relationship with Jarasandha, resulting in Kashi aligning itself with Magadha instead of Hastinapura. This alliance further strengthened Jarasandha's position and influence in the region, adding another key kingdom to his growing power. Since the time when Bhishma returned the Panchala kingdom to Vrashata after defeating Ugrayudha, Panchala had maintained a strong alliance with Hastinapura as a mark of deep gratitude. Ayodhya and Prayaga were already under the control of Hastinapura, further solidifying the kingdom's dominance and influence across the northern regions of Bharata. After the marriage of his daughters to Dhritarashtra, Subala, the king of Gandhara, naturally forged a strong alliance with Hastinapura, becoming a significant ally to the west. This alliance further bolstered Hastinapura's strategic position, as Gandhara already had control over the neighboring kingdoms of Magadha and Gaurani. This support added a crucial buffer and significantly strengthened Hastinapura's influence in the western territories. The strategic union of Pandu with Kunthi brought the crucially positioned Kunthi Bhoja kingdom into alliance with Pandu. This alliance provided Hastinapura with an essential geographical foothold, enhancing its influence and securing a vital link to the southern territories. After receiving messages from King Pandu, several kingdoms confirmed their alliance with Hastinapura, among them Kolasi to the north, Virata, Suvira, Dwaraka, and Saura from southwest, as well as Kusala and Mithila from the east, pledged their support in favor of Hastinapura. These alliances further strengthened Hastinapura's strategic position across the Bharata continent. Additionally, the kingdoms of Dasharna, Suvma, which also held control over Rajagruha, Videha, and Pundra, confirmed their alliance against Hastinapura, siding with the ever-expanding power of Magadha. This opposition further complicated the geopolitical landscape as these alliances shifted the balance of power, strengthening Magadha's position in the central region. Mathura, with its direct borders adjoining Hastinapura, under the rule of King Ugrasena, chose to remain neutral. Ugrasena's domain extended its influence over the kingdoms of Vidisha, Sanchi, and Ujjaini, making his neutrality a significant factor in the regional power dynamics. His decision to stay neutral added an element of unpredictability to the unfolding alliances, as his influence could sway the balance either way in this delicate geopolitical chessboard. King Pandu marched towards Dasharna with a vast army, determined to secure Hastinapura's supremacy. The journey, though long, was completed in just 6 days, a testament to his unparalleled leadership and the discipline of his forces. As they reached the borders of Dasharna, the soldiers were eager to display their loyalty and strength under Pandu's command. Upon arrival, Pandu immediately began assessing the battlefield. His sharp eyes scanned the terrain, noting the hills, rivers, and fortifications that could be used to their advantage. He divided his forces into 3 battalions, each positioned strategically to outmaneuver the Dasharna forces. He placed his archers on the high ground, his infantry at the forefront to lure the enemy into the open, and his cavalry on the flanks, ready to strike at the opportune moment. As the battle commenced, the sky darkened with the arrows of Pandu's archers, each one finding its mark with lethal precision. Pandu himself, at the forefront, was a sight to behold. His bow, strung with divine skill, sang as he released arrow after arrow, each one cutting through the air like a streak of lightning. His strategic acumen was on full display as he directed his forces, using feints and counter attacks to draw the enemy out of their stronghold. At one point, as the Dasharna forces attempted a surprise flank attack, Pandu's keen instincts sensed the movement. Without hesitation, he nocked a special arrow, one imbued with celestial power, and fired it towards the advancing troops. The arrow split the air with a thunderous roar, its trajectory perfect. And a fiery blast erupted, sending horses and soldiers near it into scattered pieces of flesh, a sight the soldiers had never witnessed before, one that they perceived as a manifestation of divine power. Seizing the moment, Pandu ordered his cavalry to charge, their swift horses thundering across the battlefield. The Dasharna forces, already disoriented by the fiery barrier, were quickly overwhelmed. Pandu's forces closed in, surrounding the enemy from all sides. With his strategy and archery, the once formidable Dasharna army was brought to its knees, their defenses crumbling under the relentless onslaught. The battle ended with a decisive victory for Pandu. His strategic brilliance and unmatched skill in archery had secured another kingdom for Hastinapura, further solidifying his reputation as one of the greatest warrior kings of his time. As he stood on the battlefield, surveying the conquered land, his thoughts were not of glory, but of the duty he had fulfilled. Duty to neutralize any threats to Hastinapura. This information sent shockwaves through the kingdoms of Suma, Videha, Pundra, and Kashi, which had pledged their alliance with Jarasandha. They quickly informed Jarasandha that they would likely be Pondu's next targets and urged him to plan the next move. Jarasandha convened a council meeting to strategize. His ministers and advisors proposed two highly successful plans. The first was to launch a direct attack on Hastinapura, as the bulk of its army was with Pondu in Dasharna, potentially leaving Hastinapura vulnerable. The closest and most strategic point to launch this attack would be from Kashi. Jarasandha, with his sharp strategic mind, immediately dismissed the idea of attacking Hastinapura despite its reduced defenses. He was fully aware that a formidable one-man army resided in Hastinapura, a force to be reckoned with. Bhishma. He knew well about the legendary might of Bhishma, a warrior whose prowess was spoken of in reverent whispers across the continent. Bhishma's reputation as a man who could annihilate entire battalions with a single arrow was not a mere myth. To face such a force, even with vast army, would be to court disaster. Moreover, the thought of a wrestling duel, Jarasandha's favored method of conquest, brought another man to his mind. Dhritarashtra. Though blind, Dhritarashtra was a man of immense physical power, one of the very few who could possibly match Jarasandha's own strength. If lost in such a duel, would not only strip Jarasandha of his conquests, but also of his carefully built reputation. It was a risk he could not afford to take. As the ministers proposed an alternative plan to attack Mithila, the nearest kingdom allied with Hastinapura, Jarasandha listened intently. Capturing Mithila would indeed be a victory, a way to restore balance after the loss of Dasharna. But something about this plan seemed insufficient, almost too straightforward for a mind as cunning as his. He knew that merely evening the odds was not enough. He needed a strategy that would ensure his dominance and secure his legacy. Jarasandha's mind began to whirl with possibilities, piecing together a plan that would not only reclaim lost ground, but also set a trap for his enemies, drawing them into a web of his making. His ministers had offered plausible solutions, but Jarasandha was envisioning something far grander, something that would not just respond to the threat of Hastinapura, but redefine the entire power structure of Bharata. He remained silent as the council discussed the proposed strategies, with a faint smile playing on his lips. Kripacharya visited his sister Kripi and her husband Drona, as Kripi was soon to give birth to their child. Drona was deep in training at Parashurama's ashram, located in the northern region of Panchala. Under Parashurama's tutelage, Drona had mastered the knowledge of all kinds of divine astras. Upon the completion of his training, Parashurama blessed Drona and departed from the ashram. Kripacharya then informed Drona that in the near future, Dhritarashtra would father 100 children, and he urged Drona to accompany him back to Hastinapura. He suggested that with Drona's newly acquired knowledge of the astras, he could train the future rulers and, in doing so, secure wealth and prosperity like never before, especially given Drona's current financial struggles. But Drona declined the offer. He explained that he intended to visit Panchala to meet its king, Drupada, who was his childhood friend. Drona believed that by imparting the knowledge of the astras to Drupada, he could transform Panchala into a formidable kingdom, potentially as powerful as Hastinapura. Drona admitted that he hadn't sought out Drupada during his toughest times because he had nothing to offer then. But now, armed with the best knowledge in the world, he could provide Panchala with unmatched strength. Kripacharya was moved by Drona's deep sense of loyalty to his friendship and respected his decision. After Pandu conquered Dasharna, as anticipated, pressed forward with his campaign, setting his sights on the kingdom of Suhma. His unparalleled combat skills, combined with the devastating power of the astras he wielded, made him a formidable force on the battlefield. His strategic brilliance in commanding the vast Hastinapura army led to a swift and decisive victory over Suhma. Energized by this triumph, Pandu wasted no time in rallying his troops and marching with unwavering determination towards Pundra, ready to extend his conquests further. His reputation as a fearsome warrior and a master tactician began to spread across the lands, sending waves of apprehension through the remaining kingdoms that had aligned with Jarasandha. Pandu's march towards Pundra was swift, his vast army cutting through the terrain like a relentless wave. The kingdom of Pundra, however, was not prepared for such a formidable force. Its king, Satyavathi, was well aware of the limited capabilities of his army. He knew that his small battalion stood no chance against the might of Hastinapura's forces. But more than the fear of losing his kingdom, what weighed heavily on Satyavaki's heart was the fate of his young son, Pandraka. The thought that his son being enslaved after losing deeply tormented him. Determined to protect his son's future, Satyavathi made a bold decision. Before the battle could commence, he requested a meeting with King Pandu. In the early dawn, the two kings met. Satyavathi, with a mixture of resolve and desperation in his eyes, approached Pandu with a proposition. Knowing full well that Pandu was a master archer, armed with divine astras that could turn the tide of any battle, Satyavathi nonetheless challenged him to a sword fight. The terms were clear and simple. If Pandu lost the duel, all his armies would be surrendered to the Pundra kingdom, and Hastinapura would be bound by honor not to harm Pandraka in the near future. Pandu himself would be left free to return to Hastinapura, but alone without his forces. On the other hand, if Satyavathi lost, Pundra would surrender entirely, and Satyavathi would leave his fate in the hands of Pandu, yet with the assurance that his son, Pandraka, would remain unharmed and free. Pandu, a warrior with a strong sense of honor, listened intently. He knew the sword was Satyavathi's strength, just as the bow was his own. The challenge was steeped in risk, as Pandu understood that Satyavathi's skill with the sword was legendary. Yet, as the memories of the previous battles haunted him, memories filled with the screams of men and the sight of countless corpses, Pandu felt a deep reluctance to engage in another bloody conflict. The prospect of sparing his soldiers and the people of Pundra from the horrors of war appealed to him. With a solemn nod, Pandu accepted Satyavathi's challenge, agreeing to the terms. The two kings prepared for what would be a defining moment, not just for their kingdoms, but for their own legacies. The battlefield, which would have seen the clash of armies, was now set for a duel between two warriors, each driven by a cause greater than themselves. As duel began, Satyavathi moved first, his sword slicing through the air with a fierce determination. His strikes were swift and precise, each one aimed to end the battle quickly. But Pandu, with his warrior instincts honed through countless battles, parried each blow with equal skill. Their swords clashed with a metallic ring, sending sparks flying as they fought. Though Satyavathi was a more experienced and skilled swordsman than Pandu, he found himself unable to counter Pandu's relentless determination. Pandu's unwavering will to not let Hastinapura face defeat drove him forward with a fierce resolve. Despite Satyavathi's superior technique, Pandu's sheer willpower gave him the edge he needed. In the end, Pandu overcame Satyavathi in the duel. Even when Pandu had the opportunity to strike the final blow, he chose to spare Satyavathi's life, demonstrating his honor and the values he held as a king and warrior. As a result of Drona's intense tapasya, Lord Shiva blessed him and Kripi with a son born with the divine aspect of Shiva himself. The child, adorned with a sacred Shivamani on his forehead, was destined to be protected from demonic energies and any form of illness or disease. As the boy was born with a jewel on his forehead, the villagers were naturally thrilled and filled with awe at the sight of such a rare and wondrous occurrence. The news of the miraculous birth spread quickly, and people from far and wide gathered, eager to witness the extraordinary child and the divine jewel that adorned him. Drona, overwhelmed with joy that knew no bounds, named his son Ashwathama, feeling a happiness unrivaled by anyone else in the world. Kripacharya, content and fulfilled, began his journey back to Hastinapura. After a few days, Drona, filled with hope and anticipation, decided to leave his humble abode and permanently relocate to the kingdom of Panchala. As Drona prepared to depart, Kripi, with a touch of concern, suggested that he should visit Panchala alone first, to ensure that Drupada still remembered their friendship, as it had been many years since they last met. But Drona, with unwavering confidence, reassured her. He believed that the moment Drupada laid eyes on him, he would be filled with joy and would chide him affectionately for not visiting sooner. Kripi, comforted by Drona's confidence, allowed herself to feel hopeful, believing that their years of hardship were finally coming to an end. The prospect of a renewed friendship and a brighter future filled her heart with quiet anticipation. After the death of Vrishada, his son Drupada ascended the throne of Panchala. With the weight of his new responsibilities, Drupada decided to embrace the luxuries and privileges that came with kingship. The palace, which once echoed with the disciplined presence of his father, now resonated with the splendor and opulence that Drupada indulged in, as he immersed himself in the pleasures of royal life. His court became a symbol of grandeur, where he enjoyed the finest comforts that his kingdom had to offer, all while maintaining the dignity and power expected of a ruler. While relishing the luxuries and authority of kingship, Drupada was suddenly jolted from his indulgence by a formidable and unanticipated message from Jarasandha. The message carried a grave ultimatum that Panchala must either pledge its unwavering allegiance to Jarasandha or accept a perilous challenge, a wrestling duel with the very sovereignty of Panchala as the wager. A refusal of both options would incite the wrath of Jarasandha, who threatened to unleash his mighty armies upon the kingdom. The unexpectedness of this ultimatum, particularly with kingdoms like Mithila and Kosala standing in between Magadha and Panchala, plunged Drupada into a state of deep concern. Realizing the precarious position of Panchala, Drupada swiftly composed a missive to the great northern stronghold Hastinapura, informing them of the looming threat and seeking their guidance and support in this perilous hour. His message was filled with urgency, knowing that the fate of his kingdom hung in the balance, dependent on the response of his ancient ally. In the grand halls of Hastinapura, Queen Kunti was a figure of quiet anguish. The weight of her new role as Pandu's wife bore down upon her, but even more so, the constant fear for her husband's life as he waged war far from her side consumed her every waking moment. Their marriage had been a brief moment of joy, followed almost immediately by the harsh reality of royal duty. Pandu had departed for battle the very next day, leaving Kunti in a state of perpetual anxiety. Every day felt like an eternity as Kunti awaited news from the front lines. Each time a messenger arrived, her heart would race, caught between the dread of potential disaster and the hope for her husband's safe return. She would clutch at her chest, her breath held in suspense until knowing the news delivered was good or bad. Most of her time was spent by the window, her gaze fixed on the horizon, yearning to see Pandu return victorious and unharmed. The emptiness beside her was a constant reminder of his absence, and her heart ached with a longing that words could not express. During this time, in another part of the palace, Vichitravirya received an urgent message from King Drupada of Panchala. With the message in hand, he quickly sought an audience with Bhishma. Upon hearing the contents, Bhishma, the stalwart guardian of Hastinapura, calmly assessed the situation. He remarked that Jarasanda's move was unexpected and somewhat ill-conceived, as even if Drupada rejected the wrestling challenge, it would take at least 15 days for Magadha's forces to reach Panchala. Meanwhile, Pandu's army was already positioned at the borders of Videha and Pundra, making an immediate counterattack from Magadha unlikely. Bhishma instructed Vichitravirya to reply to Drupada, advising him to reject the duel challenge and to reassure him that Panchala was ever ready for battle. Pandu, with his vast army, stood poised at Videha, a strategic advantage that Bhishma believed would deter any rash actions from Jarasandha. As these decisions were being made in the corridors of power, Kunti remained by her window, her heart heavy with worry, unaware of the strategies and alliances being formed to protect the kingdom she now called home. Dhritarashtra, who was finally beginning to feel the taste of the kingship he had dreamt of for so many years, was filled with a deep sense of satisfaction and happiness. The throne, which had long seemed out of reach, was now his to command, and the reality of his position began to settle in. However, this newfound contentment did not go unnoticed by Shakuni, who quietly observed his brother-in-law's growing comfort. Shakuni, ever the strategist, approached Dhritarashtra and warned him that feeling settled was dangerous. He reminded Dhritarashtra that this was not the time to bask in satisfaction, but to make decisive moves that would secure his kingship permanently. Shakuni whispered that Dhritarashtra was a king only in name, and that many decisions were being made without his notice. The true power, he implied, still lay elsewhere. At that moment, Shakuni's sharp eyes caught sight of Vichitravirya carrying the reply message for Drupada. Sensing an opportunity, he pointed it out to Dhritarashtra. Fueled by Shakuni's words, Dhritarashtra called Vichitravirya to him. With newfound authority, Dhritarashtra declared that the reply to Drupada should reflect his own will as king, not the counsel of others. Vichitravirya, ever wise and cautious, explained the delicate nature of the situation. He reminded Dhritarashtra that Jarasanda's challenge was a serious one, and advising Drupada to accept the duel could result in the loss of a valuable ally at a crucial time. But Shakuni's influence had already taken hold. Dhritarashtra, eager to assert his power, dismissed Vidura's concerns. With a sharp tone, he ordered Vidura to convey the message that Drupada should accept the challenge and fight like a man, or, if he still thought like a prince rather than a king, Dhritarashtra himself would come to fight Jarasandha. Satirical jab meant to provoke. Vidura hesitated, his mind troubled by the potential consequences of such a reckless message. He knew it could alienate Panchala at a time when unity was most needed. Yet, bound by his duty, Vidura had no choice but to obey the king's command. With a heavy heart, he sent the message as Dhritarashtra had ordered, aware that this could have far-reaching repercussions for Hastinapura. Despite winning the duel with Satyavathi, Pandu did not take him as a slave. Unlike the other kingdoms he had conquered, Pandu showed an unexpected act of mercy. Instead of installing his own men as rulers, he appointed Satyavathi's son, Pandraka, as the ruler of Pundra, commanding him to act under Pandu's orders. While Satyavathi felt immense relief for his son's life, he also experienced deep humiliation, receiving his own kingdom as a donation from the very man who had defeated him. Pandu continued his relentless conquest, setting his sights on Videha. By the time he reached its borders, the king of Videha, overwhelmed by fear and the stories of Pandu's continuous victories, surrendered even before the battle could begin. The army of Videha was too small, and its soldiers were already demoralized by the news of Pandu's unbroken string of successes. Pandu, with his army bolstered both physically and mentally by their king's achievements, easily took control. He installed his men and left a portion of his army in Videha to maintain order before marching onward to Kashi. When Pandu's forces reached Kashi, the kingdom was surrounded on all sides, leaving the king of Kashi, Kashiraj, with no other option but to surrender. However, as the Kashiraj was directly related to Jarasandha, Pandu felt compelled to show mercy to a man who had knelt before him. He decided to spare Kashiraj, but ordered his soldiers to strip the kingdom of all its treasures. Tons of gold, valuables, and jewelry were loaded onto carts, ready to be sent to Hastinapura. Pandu left Kashi empty to ensure that the kingdom would not have the means to engage in any cunning strategies against him. As Pandu was leaving, the Kashiraj, with a tone of bitterness, remarked that while Jarasandha had won kingdoms by defeating a single man in a duel, Pandu had killed thousands to achieve his conquest. He questioned how Pandu's methods could be considered dharma while Jarasandha's were labeled adharma. Though Pandu defended himself by stating that he adhered to the code of war and never broke it, the truth in the Kashiraj's words stirred a deep sense of guilt within him. Kashiraj also warned Pandu that Kashi was a sacred place, and taking its treasures might bring bad luck to Pandu and his kingdom. Ignoring Kashiraj's warnings, Pandu began his return journey to Hastinapura, carrying the weight of his victories and the unease of the words spoken to him. Drupada received the reply from Hastinapura, and as his eyes scanned the words, a wave of shock washed over him. Recently crowned as king, he found himself suddenly unsure of how to navigate the treacherous situation he was thrust into. The weight of Jarasanda's challenge bore down on him heavily. If he accepted the duel and lost, he feared the fate of enslavement. But if he rejected it, he risked inviting war upon his kingdom. His mind, overwhelmed with tension, faltered, unable to find a clear path forward. Desperate for guidance, Drupada convened a council meeting. His ministers, equally troubled, offered conflicting advice. Some urged him to send the kingdom's best fighter to face the challenge, while others suggested the bitter path of surrender to Magadha. Never before had Drupada felt such intense anger and helplessness. It was in this moment of turmoil that Drona, along with his wife Krupi and their newborn son Ashwathama, entered the meeting chamber. Having announced himself as Drupada's childhood friend, he was granted entry without question. But when Drupada, still gripped by hesitation and stress, looked at him, he failed to recognize the man before him. With a voice tinged with disappointment, Drona reminded him of their shared past, stating that he was Drona, his childhood companion. Drupada, without a moment's thought, harshly ordered Drona to leave immediately. Drona, taken aback, tried to explain, hoping to rekindle the bond they once shared. But Drupada, his judgment clouded by the immense pressure he was under, cut him off sharply. He acknowledged that he remembered Drona, but dismissed their childhood promises as the naive words of children who did not understand the ways of the world. Now, as king, Drupada saw Drona as little more than a beggar, shamelessly returning to exploit their past for personal gain. In a fit of anger, Drupada yanked off a golden ornament and threw it at Drona, telling him to take it and leave at once. Humiliated in front of the ministers and his own family, Drona was rendered speechless. The sting of Drupada's words and actions left him in a state of disbelief. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the palace, his head hanging low in shame. Shortly after Drona's departure, Drupada received another message from Hastinapura, this time from Vijayura. The message clarified that the previous communication was sent in error and assured Drupada of Hastinapura's unwavering support. Vijayura also informed him that King Pandu was currently stationed at Pundra with a vast army, and that Drupada had nothing to fear. Relieved by the message, Drupada felt the crushing weight of his earlier tension lift. Yet, the events that had just transpired left an indelible mark on his spirit. If Drupada had shown patience during the difficult times and extended even a modicum of respect towards Drona, he could have gained immeasurable benefits. Drona, with his profound knowledge of Divyastras, was willing to share his wisdom. If Drupada treated him with due regard, Drona would have imparted his secrets, elevating Drupada to become one of the greatest kings the world had ever seen. Despite his formidable power, Drona's capacity to obliterate entire kingdoms, including Panchala, was curtailed by his wounded pride and deep sense of insult. His state of mind was fraught with bitterness, which overshadowed his formidable abilities. The lack of respect and the personal affronts he faced prevented him from extending the hand of mentorship and alliance that could have transformed Drupada's reign and secured his legacy as a renowned ruler. It was at this critical juncture that Drupada experienced a profound realization. Confronted with his vulnerabilities and the dire consequences of relying on external alliances and support, he understood the imperative to fortify his own defenses and strengthen his army. Upon Pandu's triumphant return to Hastinapura, Bhishma received him with overwhelming joy and pride. The king who had turned the tides of destiny with his bravery and valor, reclaiming the control of Bharata, one kingdom after another, was finally home. Bhishma's eyes filled with tears of happiness, for after Shantanu, Hastinapura had once again fallen into the hands of a ruler who was both righteous and heroic. In a gesture of humility and respect, Pandu presented all the treasures he had won during his conquests to his brother, Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra, feeling an immense sense of pride and fulfillment, received the wealth with great joy. Bhishma suggested that Pandu reclaim the throne he had so rightfully earned. But Pandu, weary from the bloodshed he had witnessed, expressed his desire to take a break and embark on a period of forest exile to find peace. Bhishma, understanding Pandu's state of mind, agreed on his decision. As Pandu is talking to Bhishma, a sudden and alarming message arrived. Jarasandha, in a cunning move, had married his two daughters, Asthi and Prapthi, to Prince Kamsa of Mathura, the son of Ugrasena. This alliance created a powerful strategic position for Jarasandha, as Mathura directly bordered Hastinapura. Mathura, which held control over Vidisha, Sanchi, and Ujjaini, now stood in support of Jarasandha. Furthermore, the young king Nila of Mahishmati, who had strong ties with Mathura, entered the fray, showing his support for Magadha. The message sent to Drupada was merely a diversion, a clever tactic by Jarasandha to mislead Hastinapura into thinking his focus was on Panchala, while his true intentions lay elsewhere. Vijura also received intelligence that Jarasandha had arranged for his son, Sahadeva, to marry Madri, the sister of Madra king Shelya. This marriage strengthened Jarasandha's alliances further, as Madra was closely allied with Mushika, Shibhila, Takshasila, and Sindhu kingdoms, forming a western border against Hastinapura. The months of hard-fought conquests by Pandu seemed to unravel in an instant. Jarasandha's alliances now encircled Hastinapura from the south and west, placing the kingdom in an even more precarious situation than before. The victory that had once filled the hearts of Hastinapura's people with pride now seemed overshadowed by an even greater threat. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Pandu decided to act swiftly. He proposed to travel to Madra and ask for the hand of Madri, as Shelya was more favorable to Hastinapura than Magadha. Bhishma and Vijura agreed that this was the best course of action. Bhishma and Pandu swiftly set out for Madra. Though Bhishma managed to convince Shelya to marry Madri to Pandu, Shelya hesitated, having already given his word to Jarasandha. Sahadeva, who arrived later, argued that it was unrighteous to reconsider a promise once given. Pandu cut Sahadeva's words short, stating that Jarasandha's proposal was a cunning strategy to gain control. Sahadeva retorted that Pandu's motives were no different. Bhishma intervened, reminding them that it was always righteous to let the bride choose her groom. He left the decision in Madri's hands, hoping for a favorable outcome. When Madri saw Pandu, she was immediately drawn to him and chose him over Sahadeva. Bhishma breathed a sigh of relief and felt a surge of happiness as Madri chose Pandu. Even Sahadeva, though an enemy, respected Madri's decision and congratulated them before leaving. Pandu, Bhishma, and Shelya were pleased by Sahadeva's honorable behavior. Kunthi, who had spent nearly a year anxiously waiting for her husband's return, chose to be at the entrance of their home this time, determined not to miss his arrival. Her heart fluttered with anticipation as she awaited the sight of Pandu, hoping to reunite with him after such a long separation. But as the dust of the journey settled and Pandu finally appeared, her heart shattered. To her profound anguish, Pandu was not alone. He was accompanied by another woman, a new bride. The man who had left for war just a day after their wedding, whom she had longed to see and hoped to share her life with, had returned with a new partner. The sight of Pandu standing beside this other woman, sharing his love and life with her, was a devastating blow to Kunthi's heart. Despite the overwhelming pain and sense of betrayal, Kunthi, with a heavy heart, came to terms with her sorrowful fate. She understood that her personal anguish could not alter the course of events, and accepted the painful reality of her situation, quietly enduring the heartache that had been thrust upon her. Pandu stands by his decision for Vanavas and takes his two wives, Kunthi and Madri, and goes to the forest. The forest tribes see him as a god, marveling at his look and jewelry. He feels relieved and free in the forest, enjoying his time there. Dhritarashtra, from the palace, sends the needs for Pandu, Madri, and Kunthi. Pandu, enjoying the freedom without any responsibilities, indulges in luxuries sent by Dhritarashtra, and hunts animals daily, which he enjoys the most. Kendama Muni and his wife, possessing the immense power of shapeshifting into any living being, desired to be intimate while on their journey to their ashram. However, his wife was apprehensive about being seen, even though they were in a remote forest. To ease her worries, Kendama, using his extraordinary shapeshifting ability, transformed both himself and his wife into deers. They proceeded to be intimate in their deer form. Suddenly, 5 arrows flew through the air. 3 struck Kendama's wife, killing her instantly, and 2 hit Kendama, who fell to the ground. As they reverted to their original forms, Pandu arrived and was shocked to see the scene. Kendama, gravely injured and on the verge of death, asked Pandu why he had done this and what his motive was. Pandu explained that he was demonstrating his archery skills, claiming he could shoot arrows merely by hearing sound. Kendama Muni, with his last breaths, explained to the bewildered king that even the wildest of beasts and the most untamed of tribal hunters refrain from striking animals during their moments of intimacy. Yet Pandu, a king bound by dharma and higher standards, had committed this grievous sin. As a consequence of this act, Kendama Muni, in his final moments, cursed Pandu with a dire fate. Whenever he would attempt to be intimate with any woman, or even entertain thoughts of such, he would meet his death. With this curse uttered, Kendama Muni passed away, leaving Pandu in a state of utter shock and despair. This curse was no ordinary affliction. For a king, it struck at the very core of his purpose. The realization that he would be unable to have children, thereby leaving his kingdom without an heir, weighed heavily on Pandu. According to the Puranas, a king who leaves no progeny is doomed to suffer in the afterlife, a thought that only deepened his despair. The once mighty and valiant Pandu, who had faced countless battles with unwavering strength, now felt his power drain away, leaving him weak and desolate. The burden of this curse sapped his spirit, casting a shadow over his very existence. Life is a tapestry of unpredictability, woven with threads of joy and sorrow alike. Moments that plunge us into despair may pave the way for unexpected triumphs, while those that bring elation might harbor hidden perils. The future remains an enigma, full of unimaginable twists and turns. As we navigate this ever-shifting landscape, we find that the surprises and revelations are ceaseless, continuing to unfold until the very end.